Chapter 78. Humbert interrupted. Master, do you still want to listen to his excuses? Quickly punish this slave who violated the law. This is to protect the dignity of the master. Otherwise, more and more slaves will follow his example and violate the rules, not putting you, the master, in their eyes. Before Sayo could speak, Amon raised his head and scolded. Shut up and listen to Aesop's story. There was a strange majestic power in his voice that rushed into Humbert's mind. Humbert almost lost his balance, as if he was under some kind of pressure, and could no longer speak. Aesop then began to tell the story of Pythagoras. Pythagoras was a mysterious sage. He was the son of a great noble. He was very rich, but he led his disciples to establish a community and lived a life of asceticism. He was also a very brilliant doctor, and it was said that he was also a supreme mage. Some even said that he had seen the gods and knew their secrets. Once, Pythagoras went out to buy the daily necessities of the community. Due to the large quantity, he paid 1 parangan at a time. When he opened his purse, he accidentally dropped the parangan on the ground. A slave beside him picked it up. At that time, the owner of the shop shouted, Pythagoras, look at your slave. He touched the parangan with his hand. He should have 1 finger cut off. I have a knife here. I can lend it to you. Pythagoras took the parangan and scolded the slave. Copernicus, why did you accidentally touch the parangan again? Including this finger, how many fingers do you owe me now? The slave named Copernicus replied, Dear Master Pythagoras, including this time, I already owe you 13 fingers. Pythagoras waved his hand and called his follower over. Write it down. Copernicus owes me 13 fingers. The shop owner was surprised and asked, Pythagoras, aren't you going to cut off his fingers? Pythagoras replied calmly, According to the law, he should have his fingers cut off. But according to the law, he is my property. He did not have any disputes with others. I can decide when to cut off his fingers. Can't you see that I have already written it down? The shop owner shouted, But how can a person have 13 fingers? He only has 10 fingers, and you've already recorded 13 fingers. Pythagoras laughed coldly. Ignorant and cruel man. How dare you be so greedy as to abuse others? Your greed has blinded you. From a mathematical point of view, there was nothing impossible. He had 10 fingers, and if he cut off 13 of them, he would be left with -3. This was just a negative number. If you don't understand, Copernicus, explain it to me. Copernicus explained, Shopkeeper, if you have 10 gold coins and buy something worth 13 gold coins, how many gold coins would you have left? It's not that there isn't one. Mathematically speaking, it's -3. Do you understand? That was the end of Aesop's story. His last words were, Do you understand? Nobody knew if the others understood, but Amon understood. He couldn't help but smile. Sayo blinked and thought for a long time. Then he suddenly realized, Write it down. Aesop owes me a finger. I can decide when to cut it off. According to the 2 laws, this was just a simple evasion technique for masters to let their slaves go. However, the first person to come up with this idea was a genius. The person who followed suit was Sayo. Aesop bowed. Thank you for your kindness, master. Aesop is your property. The finger on Aesop is also master's. The shop owner's face darkened. He wanted to refute but couldn't find the words to say. Amon had already received his payment. Sayo was ready to return to Montefiore after dealing with the aftermath. The 2 parted ways here. When they left, Amon saw Aesop setting up a carriage outside. He went over to greet him alone, and thanked him for accompanying him around the city for the past 2 days. Finally, he asked, Aesop, the story you just told me was about your early years. Have you really seen the faraway sage Pythagoras? Aesop nodded respectfully. Yes, I have. I was still very young at that time. I wasn't Master Sayo's slave. Amon asked. You said that Pythagoras had seen the gods and even knew the secrets of the gods. Is this also true? Aesop quickly explained. How would I know? It's just a legend. The sage is very mysterious. There are many followers around him. Some people even say that he is the son of the gods. But legends are just legends. Amon nodded and asked with great interest. So this person, where is he now? Aesop pointed to the north. From here to the seaside, then cross the ocean to the north. When you see the coast, go west. There is a peninsula surrounded by islands. There are many city-states there. It is called the Kingdom of Hellas. The last time I heard of Pythagoras, he led his disciples to build a secluded manor on the outskirts of the city of Croton. It is called the Pythagorean Manor. Aman made a mental note of this place. If he had the opportunity to travel far in the future, he could go there and try to ask Pythagoras for advice. He remembered that Aristotle, who had helped him in Duk, was also from the Kingdom of Hellas. That place was really worth a visit. He thanked Aesop. Aesop asked, "Benefactor, I just asked a question. Why do you thank me?" Aman replied, "Because the information you told me may be very useful to me." Aesop asked curiously, "Are you interested in the secrets of the gods? If that is the case, I have a suggestion." Aman was a little surprised. "Oh, what suggestion do you have?" Aesop pointed to the spire of the temple in the distance and said, "These are all illusory legends, including the gods themselves. In that case, you might as well ask the gods themselves. If they really appear in the human world, you might as well ask the gods themselves. If they really appear in the world, in the legends, the gods will also walk in the world in various identities. They will even stand in front of you and speak to you." Aman smiled and suddenly thought of Murin's shepherdess, Eunamna. He smiled and said to Aesop, "Thank you for your suggestion. I will consider it." Aesop bowed deeply and said, "You saved my life. Just now you also gave me a chance to speak. I have not expressed my gratitude yet. Why are you thanking me again?" Aman, "When I first met you, you shouted at me from the carriage, reminding me to hide. If I was just an ordinary passerby, your shout would have saved my life. In that case, it was not me who saved you, but you who saved me. When your own life was at stake, you did not forget to save the life of an innocent passerby, so I want to say thank you." Aesop, "Can I ask you another question? What is your deepest wish?" Aesop answered very seriously, "Freedom." Aman, "Freedom. Do you want to get rid of the status of a slave?" Aesop, "Not exactly. Although I am a slave, when I look up at the starry sky, my heart can fly freely with wings. My body is not tied down by things, my heart is not bound by desires, and I am detached from existence. This is the freedom I yearn for." Not expecting a slave to say such words, Aman was slightly taken aback. He smiled and said, "The kind of freedom you are talking about, I am afraid only the gods can understand it. I have to say thank you again. Aesop, take care. Maybe one day you will reach the other side of freedom." Aman wanted to buy this slave and maybe try to give him the identity of a free person, but on the one hand, Sio might not be willing to sell him, and on the other hand, it was really inconvenient for him to walk around the Igut with a slave, so he had to give up the idea for the time being. After saying goodbye, Aman returned to the inn to pack up his things, and went straight to Roddick's mansion in the east of the city. He came to the luxurious mansion and said to the gatekeeper, "I come from afar, and I have an important matter to see Master Roddick." In front of the mansion stood 4 men who looked like gatekeepers, and next to them were 6 guards in bright armor. Aman didn't know who to look for, so he asked the one closest to him. The man lowered his head and glanced at Aman. "If there is something, you can go to the various offices of the city to apply for it. Unrelated people should not stay here at will. If you come to see Master Castellan for a small matter, is there anything else you can do?" This was the truth. If there was something to do, they should find a place to do it. If they all came to see Roddick directly, even if this Master Castellan was not annoyed to death, he would probably be busy to death. Aman explained very politely, "My matter is both official and private. I am afraid that the various offices of the city cannot handle it. I must see Master Castellan Dick himself. It is very important, please inform him." The other 3 gatekeepers also came over and said, "Foreigner, do you know the rules? Do you think Master Castellan is someone you can see just because you say so? Master Dick is not at home, and even if he is at home, he must inform the gatekeeper to let you wait. If you really have a very important matter, we dare not delay it. Please make it clear and show us the proof." Another person reminded in a low voice, "We can let you wait outside the door." When master returns, we will let the second housekeeper inform you. If master is willing, he will let you in. But if a small matter disturbs master's rest, master will be angry, and we will all be reprimanded. We should at least reward you for your hard work, right? Amon did not have the experience of asking to see a big shot like Roddick. Of course, it was not something he could see whenever he wanted to. If it was a distinguished guest, he was usually invited to a special guest hall to rest first, and Master Dick would only receive him after reporting. If ordinary strangers came to visit, if they really had something to do, they would have to wait outside the door and let the gatekeeper inform them. If they disturbed Master Dick's rest for no reason, the gatekeeper would also be reprimanded, so the man hinted to Amon that they would only bend the rules if he gave them a bribe. He did not know if Amon understood, but when the man was about to reach out his hand after saying this, he found that Amon had already turned around and left. He could not help but scold from behind. Where did this wild boy come from? Making trouble in front of the castellan's door. Is he looking for fun? It was not that Amon was reluctant to bribe the gatekeeper, but the encounter in front of the mansion made him change his mind. The mansion was deep, and once he walked in, the consequences would be unpredictable. He was not sure if Roddick was trustworthy, and Nero's relics were quite precious. If the castellan had any other intentions, wouldn't it be troublesome if he detained him and the relics on the spot? It was not like he had not suffered such losses before. Amon could deal with several accidents, but in Roddick's mansion, he would not be able to escape with his ability. Amon turned around and went to the Temple of Horus located in the center of the city. He had already found out that Roddick, as the chief priest of Cape States, would host a sacrificial ceremony to the gods every month. The citizens of the city could visit and worship outside the temple hall, and today was just in time. He originally wanted to wait outside the mansion for Roddick to return home, but now he planned to go directly to the temple square and take out Nero's staff in public. When Amon arrived at the square, the sacrificial ceremony was already over. Several priests stood on the steps, and the crowd was like a tide coming out of the spacious and tall stone pillars in front of the temple gate. Roddick boarded the carriage with his entourage. There were guards in front of him, and the crowd automatically retreated to make way for the castellan. He had already planned to return to his mansion. At this moment a voice shouted, "Lord Roddick, I have come to return the staff and relics of the Supreme Mage Nero in accordance with the last words of the former chief priest of Cape States, Lord Nero." The voice was so loud that even the priests standing on the high steps heard it. Everyone was surprised and looked curiously in the direction of the voice. Someone whispered to the onlookers around him, "Who is Nero?" Another person explained, "Nero was the chief priest of the city more than 30 years ago, a supreme mage. It is said that he had died for the country." What's going on after so many years? Someone actually returned the staff of Lord Nero. In front of the guards of Lord Roddick, the crowd parted, but there was a young man standing still, holding a staff in his hand. He was the one who had just shouted. Someone stopped the convoy and raised his staff. The guards drew their weapons and were on guard. If it weren't for Amon's words just now, the guards would have taken him down by now. Roddick's carriage stopped. He lifted the curtain and walked down, followed by two people, both of whom Amon had seen before, the clerk Phael Judah and his aide Aristotle. As soon as Amon saw Roddick coming out, he knelt on one knee and raised his staff high above his head, making a gesture of offering. The guards breathed a sigh of relief. The crowd parted to form a circular open space, surrounding Roddick's convoy and Amon in the middle. Several priests of the shrine also hurriedly trotted over. Aristotle felt that Amon looked familiar at first glance, but he couldn't remember where he had seen him before. It wasn't that the young sage had a bad memory. In the past 2 years, Amon's appearance had changed too much. His facial features still vaguely resembled those of when he was young, but he had completely grown into an adult. Roddick was about to go over and ask in detail when Phael Judah pulled him back and said, "My lord, be careful. Let's figure out the situation first. What if it's an assassin?" Aristotle pulled at the hem of his robe, separated the guards, and walked to Amon. He asked in a pleasant tone, "Young man, why are you standing in front of the governor's caravan with your staff raised high?" Amon replied loudly, "As I said just now, According to the last words of the former chief priest of the city, the supreme mage Nero, I am here to return his staff and relics. It is said that this staff contains the message left by Lord Nero. Please examine it, Lord Roddick. Aristotle reached out to take the staff and asked again, What is your name? How did you get the relics of Lord Nero? Amon replied, I am a hunter deep in the mountains. My name is Amon. When I was chasing prey, I found the words written in the cave. It was left by the former chief priest of the Cape States, the supreme mage Nero. He hoped that someone could find his relics and return them to the Cape States, return the staff to the shrine, return the relics to the family, and promise a reward. I came all the way through the mountains and the desert to fulfill the last wish of the deceased. Amon? Your name is Amon? Aristotle was slightly startled. He seemed to remember something, but he did not say anything. He turned around and walked back with the staff. Several priests of the shrine had already run down the long stairs and came to Roddick's side. One of the older priests looked at the staff in Aristotle's hand and said with a trembling voice, This is really the staff of the chief priest of the Cape States. Lord Nero took it with him 30 years ago and never returned. I didn't expect to see it again. The handle of the staff was made of yellowish-brown wood. The texture was very strong and durable. There was no sign of decay at all. The top of the staff was inlaid with a turroculus. No one knew how it was made, but the turroculus seemed to have grown naturally in the grain of the wood. Only a few sharp edges could be seen. The onlookers could see it clearly. Anyone who had seen it before could recognize at a glance that it was indeed the staff used by Nero. The foreigner who came all the way here did not lie. Roddick took the staff. He could not help but tremble with excitement. This staff belonged to the shrine of the Cape States. Only the chief priest was qualified to hold it. After Nero disappeared, the staff was also lost. The next chief priest was Roddick's father, Old Dick. A few years ago, Roddick succeeded as the chief priest. Although he found another skilled craftsman to forge the staff, it was certainly not as precious as the staff that had been passed down from generation to generation. He did not expect it to return today. Was it a gift from the gods? It was returned to the Cape States by a foreigner. Roddick personally received it in front of the shrine in front of thousands of people. The symbolic meaning of this was extremely important. Roddick had been in officialdom for a long time, so his reaction was quite fast. He took the staff and raised it above his head with both hands. He turned towards the direction of the shrine and knelt down. Thank you, Horus. Thank you, great God. Under your guidance, the staff of the previous chief priests has returned to the city. As soon as the governor knelt down, everyone followed suit. For a moment, there was no one left standing in the huge square. Everyone was thanking the gods. The voices of thousands of people were like a tsunami. Seeing this scene, Amon knew that he had done the right thing. Returning the staff in public was the best choice. Chapter 79. Roddick had the skill of a wise politician. He was able to steer an unexpected event in the most advantageous direction. There was no script for this scene in advance, but if it was designed by a dramatist, the best effect could not be more than this. When he received the staff and heard the cheers of the crowd, the prestige of the gods also increased the prestige of the lord of the city. Amon, who was kneeling at the back of the guards, was supposed to be the most important person, but now he seemed to have become a minor character. After thanking the god, Roddick stood up and led the crowd to Amon. He lifted Amon up with one hand and asked, Hero, where did you find the last words and relics of Lord Nero? Can you tell me in detail? Amon answered, Deep in the mountains on the west bank of the Euphrates River. Only wild beasts roam there. I was chasing a wild beast when I lost my footing and fell off a cliff. That's how I saw it. There are some words in a cave under the cliff, along with a staff and a ring. As he spoke, he took out the ring and handed it back to Roddick. Roddick's hand sank slightly. This ring was not light at all. Clearly, it was a spatial artifact that could store items. Roddick was a 6th-level warrior and had learned elementary magic. However, he didn't have the ability to use a spatial artifact. He could feel the weight of the ring in his hand, but he didn't know what was inside. Faal Judah asked, Amon, you're a hunter. How can you read? Amon didn't have a good impression of this clerk. He answered calmly, I'm a hunter, but my grandfather wasn't. He was a clerk who was punished. Faal Judah frowned and asked again. The mountains on the west bank of the Euphrates River should be in the territory of the Hittite kingdom. You're a Hittite. Even if you can read, how can you read an Igut? Amon explained naturally. Master Nero's last words were written in 2 languages. Of course, he couldn't tell the whole truth. It was actually the story of Madanzo's great-grandfather's last words that Crazy Ol saw in the mountains. Amon just borrowed it and changed it to Master Nero's last words. Bear's message in the mysterious cave was written in 2 languages. Facing Judah's question, Amon answered without hesitation. As for Nero's last words, they were completely true. Amon didn't make up anything else. The Taraculus inlaid on the wand contained the message left by Nero. As long as Roderick asked someone to verify it, it would be clear that it couldn't be faked. However, he couldn't say that he had read the message, because that would expose his identity as a sorcerer. There were different languages in different countries on the continent, but their languages were similar. Amon didn't hide his identity as a foreigner, because his accent still had traces of it. Roderick realized that it wasn't the right place to ask too many questions, and it wasn't the right time to talk in front of the crowd. He took Amon's arm and said, You've come from afar. Let's not talk in the square. Let's talk in the temple. Lord Dick didn't go home in the afternoon. He changed his mind and went back to the temple of Horus. The crowd followed him up the long stone steps. The crowd was still cheering. Faal Judah walked behind them. He felt that Amon's accent was very familiar. It left a deep impression in his memory. He looked at Amon's back. Although he was standing beside Lord Roddick and surrounded by the nobles, the boy's steps were steady and his back was straight. He didn't look nervous at all. Faal Judah suddenly remembered something. 2 years ago, in the remote and desolate town of Duk, one of Faal Judah's proudest deeds was that he took the god's tear away as soon as possible, which made Lord Roddick's plan to elect the adoratress a success. It didn't matter who the miner was. The Parangan of Duk must have been found by a miner. It was just his luck. But Faal always remembered that when he walked into the low house, the boy with the sledgehammer didn't kneel at first. He stood straight in front of the anvil, just like that. But at that time, he hadn't grown up yet. Judah could not forget the 3 sentences the young man had said to him at that time. Who are you? How can you come in like this? When you mine a Parangan, you have to stand to swing the hammer. Otherwise, how can you see it being taken out in one piece? My name is Amon. People here call me Amon. Yes, that's him. The name the boy told Aristotle was Amon. Faal Judah shouted in his mind. He finally recognized Amon. He was the young miner who mined the god's tear in Duk. He thought he would never see him again. Now he was walking with Lord Drick holding his arm in the cheers of the people. Should he tell Lord Drick? If he had said it out loud, Amon would have received even more gratitude. But Faal Judah was worried about one thing. Lord Drick had given him 30 gold coins as a token of appreciation for the miner, but he had only given Amon 30 silver coins. This was a trivial matter. No one would blame a clerk for pocketing his own money. But now that this matter had been exposed, Faal Judah would be too ashamed to face anyone. Many so-called trivial matters were like this. They seemed insignificant, but when they were exposed, it was a stain on one's noble character. Listening to the cheers of the people, Faal Judah would never be able to raise his head again if they talked about the past. Does Amon still remember me? Faal Judah thought to himself. He hoped that Amon had already forgotten. However, Judah's rationality told him that it was impossible. If he was in the miner's shoes, he would never forget that scene. Would Amon talk about the past later? He hoped that he wouldn't. Even if he did, there was no need to talk about the small details of the 30 silver coins. Last time, Amon had received the god's tear. Lord Drick had thanked Mayor Dusty. But this time, it would be Amon himself who would receive the reward. Returning the chief priest's staff in front of the people in the temple square was a perfect scene. Compared to the reward he would receive, 30 silver coins was not worth mentioning. This child must not know that Roddick had given him 30 gold coins. Faal Judah kept comforting himself. At the same time, Judas thought that this child was too lucky. He was the one who mined the god's tear and made Roddick's plan succeed. Today he was the one who returned Nero's lost staff in public, making Roddick's reputation reach a new peak. He was like a god who cared for Roddick. Why did all the good things happen to a lowly miner? This was too unfair. Wasn't the town of Duk destroyed by the flood and no one survived? Why was he still alive? No one knew how many thoughts were surging in Faal Judah's mind. The long steps in front of the shrine seemed so long. The weather was not hot, but Judas's forehead was oozing sweat. Not only did Faal Judah recognize Amon, but Aristotle also recognized him. He was the one who saved the child in the square, and sent him to the adoratress Maria as a servant for 3 days. But when Amon saw that Roddick did not mention the past, nor did he show any sign that he knew Aristotle, he obviously did not want to talk about it anymore. Moreover, Amon's appearance had indeed changed a lot. He was almost unrecognizable. It was said that Duk had been destroyed by the flood, so this surviving child must have gone through too many hardships. It was normal that he did not want to talk about the past. Everyone had a secret that they did not want to talk about. As long as he did not talk about it, Aristotle would not point it out. After all, it was Amon's own business. Aristotle also sighed with emotion. This young miner named Amon was really like a god who cared for Roddick. He not only mined the god's tear at the right time, but also returned the oracle's staff at the right time. As Roddick's most valued and trusted aide, Aristotle knew very well what the young castellan was worried about all this time. The empire of Igut was powerful, but the Cape States on the northeast border were relatively weak. Once the neighboring kingdom of Babylon and the Hittite kingdom started a war, the Cape States would be in a passive position. The Uruk city of Babylon was guarded by the great hero Gilgamesh, and the greatest warrior on the continent, Enkidu. No one dared to attack them. But what if they attacked the empire of Igut in the west? How could the Cape States defend against them? The relationship between the kingdom of Babylon and the empire of Igut was relatively peaceful. For the time being, there was not much danger of war. But on the other hand, the Hittite kingdom might be in danger. On the surface, the Hittite kingdom had submitted to the empire of Igut for many years, but it was precisely because of their dissatisfaction with this fate that they had been accumulating strength to resist. A great flood cut off the land transportation and temporarily saved the Cape States, but the flood would not last forever. The soldiers of the city of Saya were well equipped, and most importantly, they were united. It was said that the chief priest, Goliath, led the people to protect the city and later became a 9th-level supreme mage. His reputation in Saya was unparalleled, and he was even more powerful than the gods. This kind of unity was the most terrible weapon in the chaos of war. It could make people sacrifice their lives for a single goal. In the battle of thousands of soldiers and horses, the personal strength of the top masters of the continent, such as Gilgamesh, Enkidu, and Goliath, might not be the decisive factor. Their real strength lay in their rallying power and unity among the people. In contrast, although Roddick was also a talented governor, he could not reach that level. That was why when Amon returned the staff in public, Roddick was so excited that even the hands of the governor, who had always been calm, were trembling slightly. The powerful empire and the relatively weak city-states were strategically important and faced with the potential threat of war. This was what worried Roddick the most. One could not blame the governor for thinking so far ahead. Once something happened, he could not escape. Not only was he the governor, but his family's territory for generations was also in the Cape States. On the other hand, the power of an individual was not the absolute factor in winning against thousands of soldiers and horses, but it was also a symbol and a guarantee of stability. After the death of Nero, there had been no supreme mage in the Cape States for more than 30 years. Compared to the Uruk of Babylon and the Saya of Hittite, the Cape States were at a clear disadvantage. Since Maria became the adoratress, she had gradually mastered some of the important affairs of the Temple of Isis in Montefiore. Roddick had repeatedly applied to send a supreme mage to the Cape Shrine, but there had been no response. Not long ago, the adoratress finally sent a message that an 8th-level supreme mage would be sent to inspect the shrine in the border. Roddick was ready to take this opportunity to invite the supreme mage to stay and serve as the chief priest of the Cape States. But how should he bring this up? Who would want to leave the prosperous and comfortable Montefiore to live in Cape? An 8th-level Supreme Mage could live comfortably anywhere. Coincidentally, the day before the Supreme Mage's arrival, the staff of the Chief Priest was miraculously returned, giving Roddick a good excuse and opportunity to make a request. Naturally, Amon did not know that he had come to the Cape under such a complicated background. In fact, he had always had a good impression of Roddick. It was precisely because of the governor's arrival that Amon had the opportunity to meet Iko. Therefore, there was always an inexplicable sense of gratitude in his heart. It was this governor who had once sent Iko to his side. The shrines in the Cape States were much more magnificent than the Temple of Horus in Duk. Upon entering the main hall, the first thing Amon did was to pay his respects to the statue of Horus in the center. For the first time, Amon carefully looked at this legendary god. Although there was also a Temple of Horus in Duk, it was only a symbol of submission to the Empire of Igut. Usually, no one would voluntarily offer sacrifices to it. The statue of Horus here was more than 50 feet tall. Its arms were folded in front of its chest, and behind its shoulders hung a pair of huge wings. The human body was carved with the head of an eagle, and its eyes were even sharper than the beak of an eagle. According to legend, the incarnation of Horus was a divine eagle that roamed the heavens, so the craftsman created such a statue. The huge statue exuded an indescribable sense of oppression. Everyone involuntarily bowed as soon as they entered the shrine. After paying his respects to the god, Amon was invited to sit down in a side hall. Sitting among a group of noble lords, Amon did not seem too flattered. He had talked face to face with the princess of the kingdom, and he had even walked on the grassland with a goddess in his arms. This kind of scene was nothing to him. Roddick was a little surprised. He smiled and said, "Our righteous Amon, you have an unusual temperament. You are firm and calm. Even when sitting beside the noble lords, you do not panic at all. This is very rare for a young man." Amon bowed and explained, "I have been hunting ferocious beasts in the dangerous mountains. I have experienced countless life and death situations. I rarely feel panic now." Roddick said, "Oh, I see. It is fate that has shaped you. You discovered Master Nero's last words while hunting. Can you tell me the details?" Amon then changed the time and characters of Crazy Old's story, and retold Nero's last words and the course of events. Finally, he explained, "I read the words on the cave. Master Nero hoped that someone could find his relics and return them to Cape States. The staff should be returned to the shrine, and the ring should be returned to his family according to his will." He did not repeat the words of the Taraculus, but he did not hide what he had obtained either. He told Roddick about the 3 scrolls. After all, Roddick only needed to check the message and he would know. Roddick was very interested and asked, "May I ask if you have brought the 3 scrolls? I don't mean anything else. It is a reward from Master Nero, so it is yours. I am just curious." Amon could not take out the 3 scrolls, and he did not want to take them out, not to mention that 2 of them had already been used up. He replied regretfully, "I only found out about Lord Nero's last words when I fell off the cliff. The mountain road was very dangerous. When I got out of the difficult situation, I accidentally cut my bag by the thorns and lost the 3 scrolls. Fortunately, I still have the staff and the ring." Roddick sighed and said, "What a blessing in misfortune. Don't be sad, I will thank you greatly. Please wait a moment, we are going to check the message left in the staff." It was not difficult to check the message left in the staff, as long as one had mastered advanced message magic. They did not do it in front of Amon. Nero's message was very important, and it might involve some secrets. It was not suitable for a foreigner to know. In a small meditation room in the shrine, Roddick handed the staff to the oldest priest. There were not only the governors of the city, the 3 high priests of the shrine, but also the heirs of the Ramos family. Nero was just a name. As a full-time priest who dedicated himself to the gods, he used the name registered in the shrine's directory. People no longer called him by his family name. Nero was born in the Ramos family, a great noble family in the Cape States. Nero himself had no children, but there were 9 adult nephews in the family. They should also be present. Roddick was very thoughtful and sent horses to pick up all the people who could be picked up. When the priest raised the staff, Nero's voice from more than 30 years ago echoed in the meditation room again. Whoever is lucky enough to come here and pick up my staff, please listen to my last words. I am Nero, the chief priest of the Cape States of the Empire of Igut, a 7th-level supreme mage. When you return the staff to the Shrine of Cape, please find Lord Drick and ask him to invite a supreme mage who is proficient in advanced spatial magic to take out the will from the ring and read it in public. Lord Drick is trustworthy. After listening to the last words, everyone's expression changed. Nero's last words involved some secrets, including his doubts and hesitations about the gods when he was facing death. These were not suitable to be made public. The Igut government had already made a conclusion about Bear's past 30 years ago, and the details were not allowed to be spread to the outside world. Although Nero claimed in his last words that he did not betray the gods, it was detrimental to his reputation after his death, and the impact on the hearts of the people of the city. Chapter 80. The priest replied, I can only read the message but not erase it. Only a supreme mage can do it. Tomorrow, the high priest of the Montefiore Shrine, Lord Julian, will arrive in Cape States. My lord, you can ask him for help. Roddick nodded and said, Our esteemed supreme mage Nero said some things he should not have said before he died, but he remained absolutely loyal to the gods and the empire, and gave his life for it. Everyone here must understand that what you have heard today must not be leaked, or you will become a traitor to the entire city. Everyone nodded silently. There were indeed some words in Nero's last words that could not be leaked, mainly these. In this world, the gods are not the only ones who have will. I was surprised at where Bear's strength and courage came from. When he passed through Cape States, I tried to persuade him to return to the embrace of the shrine, but I did not keep him. Bear told me that mortals can also become gods. In this regard, the gods have deceived everyone, and we are all deceived. Great Horus, I admit that I am very curious. I once said to Bear, Do not tempt me. I have long since rejected the temptation of the devil. But is the temptation of becoming a god really the devil in people's hearts? I hope to get the answer, even at the last moment of my life. Did Bear also destroy himself because of this temptation? I wanted to see Bear confirm the answer, so I let him and Trony leave the border of Igut. Although I could not stop him alone, I did not use all my strength to stop him. He is my clansman and my benefactor. I could not make up my mind to challenge him with all my courage. Roddick knew the stakes and gave a strict order on the spot. In fact, Amon was more or less aware of it. He did not mention this when he described the contents of the text he saw in the cave. However, Amon was not a member of the bureaucracy of the Empire of Igut, so he did not see it as a serious problem. He only omitted some inappropriate words to avoid trouble. Everyone was silent for a while. Finally, it was Nero's eldest nephew, the current head of the Ramsey family, Obama Ramsey, who could not help but speak first. I want to know what my uncle left us and where is his will. Roddick took out the ring and put it on the table. He smiled bitterly and said, The will and things are in this ring. This ring itself is also a precious interspatial artifact. It's something your family inherited. Unfortunately, none of us can open it. We can only wait until Lord Julian of Montefiore arrives tomorrow and ask him to deal with it. The nephews of the Ramos family stared at the ring, unable to conceal the burning desire in their eyes. The Ramsey family was very rich. They were once the second largest noble family in the Cape States, second only to the Drick family. As the chief priest of the city, Nero once had absolute authority over all the wealth of the family, but he was a prodigal son when he was young. The hobby of making scrolls was not something that ordinary people could afford. Not only did it consume a lot of effort and magic power, but it also consumed a lot of wealth. Many of the materials used to make scrolls were quite expensive, and some of them could not even be bought. After Nero became a supreme mage at a young age, 40 years of his life, endless efforts, and countless wealth were used by him to satisfy his hobby of making scrolls. Because of this, the family's wealth had shrunk greatly. Although it could not be said to be in decline, it was far from being as powerful as before. Especially after Nero's disappearance, the Ramos family did not have any outstanding talents, and was now just an ordinary noble family. But when Nero made scrolls himself, it was no longer a matter of losing money. On the contrary, it became a means of accumulating a huge amount of wealth. Because of this, he became the best scroll maker in the whole of Igut. Of course, all the work of making scrolls was not done by Nero alone. He could mobilize the power of the city and the shrines to complete the preparation of various materials and auxiliary work for him. In return, he would leave some scrolls to the city and the shrines. But on the other hand, he also made a large number of personal scrolls, such as the 3 scrolls he gave to Amon. These scrolls were priceless. Almost all the mages on the continent, as long as they had enough money, would be willing to buy them at a high price. The only fear was that Nero would not be willing to sell them. Only when those who were particularly close to him came to him for help would Nero transfer some scrolls or promise to make them for him. Even the Academy of Igut, after receiving the scrolls from Nero, spent a lot of money to order a batch of scrolls from him. When Nero chased after Bear, he set out in secret. The situation was very urgent. He left behind everything that belonged to the shrines except for the staff. He also left behind a number of personal belongings. But later, when the shrines and the descendants of his family checked his belongings, they thought that the number of personal belongings of Nero was obviously not right. Some of his personal belongings should have been taken away. Of course, those things should be very valuable. Now that they saw the space ring that was lost and found, the descendants were eager to know how much wealth was contained in it. Hearing Roddick's words, they were more or less disappointed, but they had no choice but to wait. Obama hesitated for a moment and asked again, "This ring belongs to my family. Can I temporarily take care of it on behalf of my family?" Before Roddick could say anything, Fayal Judah scolded, "The ring will be returned to you sooner or later." But the things inside have not been taken out, and the will has not been read. Of course, it should be kept by the governor. This is also the last will of Lord Nero. What? You don't trust the governor? Obama Wellington hurriedly explained. No, I didn't mean that. It would be best if the city lord kept it. I'm just worried about that outsider. The ring has been in his hands for a long time. Could it be that the item inside has already been taken out? The oldest priest shook his head and said, "The most brilliant mages in the city are here. None of us can open this ring. Can a hunter in the mountains open it?" Roderick faintly added, "Just this ring and this staff are already unimaginably valuable. If they really wanted to take something for themselves, would they return it to you?" Obama muttered, "Maybe it's because he can't open the ring and wants a huge reward from my uncle. That's why he returned it. Aren't there 3 scrolls? Why haven't we seen them? My uncle's last will was very clear. One of the scrolls is more valuable than the ring and the staff combined. What else does he want?" Roddick explained, "He hasn't asked for anything yet. Why are you worried about what he wants? Everything will be done according to the will. I will definitely handle it fairly. I've asked him about the scrolls. He lost them when he escaped from danger in the mountains. A hunter in the mountains may not know the value of those scrolls." Nero's youngest nephew Hilary suddenly screamed, "What? He lost the most precious scroll left by my grandfather?" Roddick finally showed an impatient expression. "That's his scroll, the reward promised by Lord Nero. Losing it is his own loss, not yours." The last words that Amon saw did not mention how precious those scrolls were. We only read the message in the staff. This was supposed to be an explanation, but it turned into a reminder. Hilary suddenly thought of something and said excitedly, "Yes, the message. The lord of the city ordered us not to leak Uncle's message, but who knows what that man called Amon saw in the cave." Roddick waved his hand. "I've asked him in detail. There was nothing to worry about in the message he saw. It was just some instructions from Lord Nero before he died." Hilary seemed to have found something. She leaned forward and said, "How can we believe this? Even if he saw it, he wouldn't tell the Lord. Those words can't be spread by a foreigner. I think we should put him under house arrest and interrogate him before we decide what to do with him." Roddick's face darkened. Aristotle was the first to scold him. "What a stupid and rude idea. That foreign boy named Amon traveled thousands of miles to return Lord Nero's precious relics. It is enough to show his noble and selfless character. It is also a symbol of God's care for the Lord and the Cape States. He returned the staff and the ring in front of everyone, showing his trust in Lord Drick. Didn't you see the scene of the people cheering? If we don't treat him with respect, it will seriously hurt the prestige of the late Lord Nero, your Ramos family, Lord Drick, the entire Cape States, and the gods. Hilary didn't say anything. Roddick nodded and said slowly, I won't allow anyone to do anything that will damage the prestige of the Cape States. Before Lord Nero's will and relics are dealt with, that foreigner is staying in my house. We should show our gratitude and not treat him rudely. Otherwise, who would be willing to trust me, the lord of the city? When Roddick returned to the side hall where Amon was staying, he smiled and said, Amon, we need the help of a supreme mage to retrieve Lord Nero's will and relics. It will take a few days, and you must be present as a witness. Where do you live? I'll send someone to fetch your luggage. You can stay in my house for the next few days. Amon, I'm staying in an inn. I don't have much luggage, just a few old clothes and a sick cat. Roddick, please rest assured your cat will also receive the best care. If you need anything, just ask the servants in the house. The invitation of the lord of the city was also in order. Amon couldn't refuse. At the same time, he was also very curious about Nero's relics, so he followed Roddick to the lord's house. This time, it was completely different from the time when he went alone at noon. Roddick invited him to ride in the same carriage. When the gatekeepers saw Amon coming down from the carriage of the lord of the city, they were so surprised that they couldn't believe their eyes. P.S. At almost 5 o'clock this afternoon, there was a sudden power outage at home. I looked at the computer and sighed. Fortunately, there was still half of the manuscript in the USB drive. I rushed to the office to rewrite it and barely managed to update it today. Therefore, the number of words in this chapter is a little short. Please forgive me. Chapter 81. Inheritance. They then asked Sir Dick's attendants and found out that it was Amon who returned Nero's staff in front of everyone in the temple square. They couldn't help but gasp. Amon was now a distinguished guest of the city. If they told Sir Dick about what happened in front of the mansion, they would be kicked out. They trembled in fear and wanted to apologize to Amon in private, but unfortunately, they didn't have the chance. Thankfully, what the gatekeepers were worried about didn't happen. It seemed that Amon didn't tell Sir Dick about what happened when he visited the mansion. Instead, the second butler who was in charge of guarding the gate heard about it and called the gatekeepers to reprimand them in private. They missed such a great opportunity that was delivered to their doorstep. When Amon moved into the mansion, Roddick arranged a separate small courtyard for him. Everything he ate, wore, and used was luxurious that Amon had never seen before. It was the first time in his life that he had such luxury. However, he didn't see Roddick for several days. The governor was busy with official business these days. Roddick didn't restrict Amon's freedom of movement. Other than the inner residence, he could go in and out as he pleased and receive guests. However, every time he went out, the butler would send a carriage and guards to accompany him. This was a kind of protection and a kind of surveillance. Now he couldn't let Amon go. Amon didn't need to pay when he went to the shops. He could buy whatever he wanted, and someone would keep tabs and pay for it. After Amon bought a few fun little things, he realized this and consciously did not buy anything else. After all, living in the governor's mansion, he did not lack anything. In this strange foreign land he received 2 gifts in a row. The first gift was given by the gatekeepers when he went out. It was a special snack made by them and wine bought from the shops. They were apologizing and asking Amon not to complain. Amon didn't want anything from them, but he still accepted it with a smile. He could feel their hearts. If he didn't accept the gift, it would make them anxious. But if he accepted it, it would make them feel relieved and grateful. The second gift was given by the second eldest nephew of Nero, Tashin Ramington. This noble personally came to visit, and expressed his gratitude on behalf of the Ramington family. He also apologized for not receiving Amon in person these few days. The gifts were simple and practical. 100 gold coins, 2 horses, and a luxurious carriage. The carriage didn't have the decorations of the nobles, so it could be used by commoners. There were also a few sets of clothes and 2 young and beautiful female slaves. The clothes were good. The coat, underwear, belt, pocket, and boots were all a set. It wasn't as luxurious as a noble's clothing, but it was very comfortable and durable. It was very suitable for people on a long journey. Judging from the fine stitches and exquisite cutting, it couldn't be bought in ordinary shops. Except for the female slaves, Amon accepted everything else and was happy to express his gratitude. Amon didn't know what happened in the shrine that day. Bama was unreasonably hostile to him, and Hilary even wanted to imprison him for interrogation. Tashin was a sensible man. He sent the gifts to the residents of the Ramington family for everyone to see. This also represented the respect and sincerity of the Ramington family. Although it was only a private act, it saved the face of the whole family. Amon didn't see Roddick for a few days. He also asked his attendants what the Ramington family was busy with. He learned that the 8th level Supreme Mage Julian of Montefiore had come to visit. He actually met another acquaintance here. Amon naturally didn't know this Supreme Mage, but Julian was an old friend of Bear. There was a list of people in Crazy Ole's message, telling Amon that if he encountered any trouble on the continent, he could go to these people for help. These people had been helped by Nietzsche or Bear. Crazy Ole's keepsake was once Bear's keepsake, and Julian was on that list. 30 years ago, Julian was still a 6th level mage, in charge of the archives of the Temple of Isis. Bear often read all kinds of ancient books and materials, so he became familiar with Julian and received some help from Julian. The relationship between the two was very good. Advancing from the 6th level to the 7th level was the most difficult threshold to cross in the practice of magic. Julian had received a lot of guidance from Bear, which was quite a rare favor. Later, when Bear committed a crime and left the Temple of Isis with Trony, the first person to notice was Julian. But he didn't stop them, nor did he warn them at the first time. Maybe it was because of Bear's kindness, or because he knew that he couldn't stop Bear. There were 3 teams that went after Bear. The one from Montefiore was supposed to be led by Julian, but Julie found an excuse not to go. Instead, a high priest from the Montefiore shrine led the team to the city of Straits to meet with Nero to hunt down Bear. Like the shrines of each city, the Temple of Isis also had 3 high priests in charge of various affairs, but the chief priest was the Adoratress, who had a high status in the Empire of Igut. Since the Temple of Isis ruled the shrines of the cities of Igut, the high priests had a high status, and were on an equal footing with the lords of each city. But there were only 3 high priests. Although Bear was a supreme mage, he was just an honorary high priest with no real power at first. It was not until he became the founding member of the Academy of Magic of Igut that Bear gained a high status. As the saying goes, every carrot has its own pit. It was precisely because the original high priest disappeared while hunting down Bear that Julian, who later became a supreme mage, became the new high priest of the Temple of Isis. In a sense, Bear indirectly helped Julian. Crazy Ole mentioned Julian in his message, but at the same time, he reminded Amon that after so many years, people's hearts were still unknown. If he really encountered any trouble and wanted to ask for help, he must first figure out the situation. Amon had nothing to ask Julian for help at the moment, but he was very interested in this supreme mage, and wanted to see with his own eyes how he took out Nero's relics from the space ring, so he waited patiently. He was not in a hurry, but his nephews of the Ramos family were anxious these days. When Julian came to Straits, Roddick did not mention Nero at the first moment. Instead, he gave her a grand welcome and warm hospitality. Julian went to the various shrines of the city for inspection. In fact, it was just for show. Along the way, she was warmly received and received generous gifts prepared in advance by the shrines. Each place had its own characteristics, and there were many treats that were not available in Montefiore. This kind of inspection was also a rare pleasure, and Lord Julian felt very comfortable. Lord Roddick was so enthusiastic that he accompanied her all the way and gave Julian the highest level of courtesy. He did not go home for several days and temporarily put aside other affairs in the city. But on the way out with Julian, Roddick received a secret letter from his envoy in Montefiore, explaining the background of the inspection and a message from the adoratress. Maria also asked Roddick to find a way to keep Julian in straits. The reason was a bit complicated. After more than 30 years, the Temple of Isis finally had a new adoratress. Most people were happy, but there were also a few who were dissatisfied. The first was the Lord of Montefiore, the capital of Lower Igut. Without the adoratress, everything in the city would be decided by the Lord himself. But with the adoratress, all important matters had to be consulted by the adoratress, and the Lord's personal power was greatly weakened. The other people who might be dissatisfied were the 3 high priests of the Temple of Isis, and the reason was the same. Without the adoratress, all the real power of the Temple of Isis would continue to be controlled by the 3 of them. At the same time, they would also be in charge of the temples in the cities where Igut belonged. Julian was also one of the 3 high priests in charge. There was also a practical contradiction in this situation. If the Temple of Isis did not have the adoratress for a long time, the authority of the affairs of Igut would gradually be weakened and shaken. Therefore, this situation could not continue for a long time, and a new adoratress must be selected. But the 3 high priests did not want their real power to be weakened, so they hoped that the new adoratress would just be a symbolic decoration, and everything else would still be under their control. Maria was young and inexperienced. In her first year as the adoratress, she devoted herself to practicing magic and familiarizing herself with the various situations in the Temple of Isis, so there was no conflict. However, in her position, it was impossible for Maria to forever be a saintess who did not care about anything, nor could she forever be manipulated by others as a puppet. She was also talented and intelligent. Otherwise she would not have been able to master the power bestowed by the gods in such a short time in Duk. Recently, Maria had gradually begun to take charge of some affairs of the temple independently. Changing and rectifying the old habits of the 30 years was a top priority. It just so happened that Roddick had repeatedly sent people to apply for a supreme mage to guard the Cape States. Maria took this opportunity. She sent Julian, the most greedy of the 3 high priests, to the Cape States to inspect. Inspecting the cities was a good job, and Julian came happily. But according to the secret report received by Roddick, the adoratress would send another order in a few days, ordering Julian to stay in the Cape States for a year and supervise the affairs of the border shrines. The order also reprimanded Roddick, criticizing the governor for his various omissions in the affairs of the shrine in the past few years, and asked him to respectfully and humbly accept the guidance and supervision of Lord Julian. Although the adoratress reprimanded Roddick in the order, the governor was secretly happy after hearing the news. First, she sent Julian to the Cape States, and then ordered him to stay, so that the high priest would not have the opportunity to oppose her. On the surface, the adoratress' order must be obeyed. Although it was not a very clever move, it was very effective. A year's time was enough for Maria to appoint new people to familiarize themselves with the things Julian was originally in charge of, even if everything was back on track by the time Julian returned. And Roddick also had a year's time to let Julian familiarize and adapt to the Cape States, looking for various opportunities to ask him to officially stay. Maybe after a year, when Maria was able to control the situation, she would issue an official order directly appointing Julian as the chief priest of the Cape States, and then select another trusted aide to fill the vacant position of the high priest. After receiving the secret letter, Roddick was no longer in a hurry, and just accompanied Julian on a happy sightseeing tour. They toured the territory of the city, and a few days later returned to the main city of Cape. Roddick was about to tell her about Nero's relics, but unexpectedly Julian spoke first. "My lord, I heard from the priests a few days ago that the best scroll maker in Igut, Nero, was the chief priest here. Just a few days ago, a foreigner returned Nero's staff and relics in public. Why didn't you mention this to me?" Roddick clapped his hands and said, "I was just about to say that the chief priest's staff, which had been lost for more than 30 years, returned exactly the day before Lord Julian's arrival, as if to welcome you, my lord. This is a symbol of the gods' care for Lord Julian." Julian didn't hear Roddick's implied meaning, but the words were very useful. He smiled happily and said, "I heard that not only was there a staff, But Nero also left behind a relic. What is it? I'm also very curious. Roddick looked happy and said, I was looking for an opportunity to ask for your help, but my lord has been busy these days, so I have been too embarrassed to ask. It's a shame to say that there is no supreme mage in Cape, and none of us can open the space ring to take out the will and relics, so I have to trouble my lord to help. Julian laughed and waved his hand. It's no trouble, it's just a small matter. I'm happy to help. Where is the space ring? Bring it to me now. Roddick leaned over and whispered, My lord, don't worry, there's one more thing I want to tell you in private. He whispered a few words beside Julian. Julian was surprised and replied, Oh, there's such a thing? Then quickly bring the staff. Let's go to the secret chamber of the shrine. In the secret chamber of the shrine, Julian held the staff in his hand and read Nero's last words. His face solemn, and he was silent for a long time. He didn't speak, and neither did Roddick. After a long time, Julian once again activated the Taroculus and listened to the last words from beginning to end again. Then the message in the Taroculus gradually weakened until it was inaudible, having been erased by the Supreme Mage without batting an eyelid. Julian said solemnly to Roddick, Nero's last words involve many secrets. They must not be leaked. I wonder who has read this message? Roddick bowed and replied, They are all related and trustworthy. For the sake of Nero himself, for the city, for the temple of Isis, for the honor and prestige of the entire empire of Igut, I have strictly ordered everyone not to leak it. Otherwise they will suffer the most severe punishment. Now that this message has been erased, even if someone were to speak about it, it would never be acknowledged. Julian asked again, What about the foreigner who returned the staff? What does he know? We must be careful with this man. Roddick explained, He only saw the letter left by Lord Nero in the cave, and did not mention the past that should not be made public. Now this man is living in my mansion, and his entry and exit are monitored. After thinking about it, he added worriedly, This man's act of returning the staff and the relics has been regarded by the people of the city as a symbol of the god's favor and gift. Just before your arrival, this also symbolizes your honor, so it is not good for us to be rude to this man, and we must express our due gratitude. Julian smiled and shook her head. Lord Dick, you worry too much. I just want to meet this man and praise his noble and selfless character in person. Roddick. You can see him tomorrow, and he will be present when the relics are taken out and the will is read. That night, Roddick returned to his mansion for the first time in several days. That night, Julian stayed in the room that belonged to the chief priest of the shrine, but she couldn't sleep. Roddick did not know that the supreme mage had his own concerns and desires. The foreign boy named Amon should be the only person in the world who had seen the last relics of Nero. Julian thought that the secret of more than 30 years ago would never be discovered again. She did not know how many words Nero had left behind, and whether there was any mention of what had happened between him and Bear. This was what worried Julian the most. On the other hand, Nero said in the message that Bear had told him that mortals could also become gods. This sounded unbelievable, but it had to be believed. What kind of temptation could make a 9th-level supreme mage leave the shrine and become the enemy of the entire empire? And Trony, the adoratress, was actually willing to go with him? Maybe Bear really knew something, and Nero disappeared while chasing after Bear, so he should be the last person to see Bear. Maybe he also knew something. There was no relevant information mentioned in the message left on the staff. If there was such content, it was likely to be in Bear's note in the cave, and even if the foreign boy saw it, he would not say anything. No one would say anything. The next day, Amon rode in the carriage of the lord of the city to the shrine of Cape States. In a solemn hall at the back of the shrine, everyone was present. Lord Julian sat in the middle, with a ring on the round table in front of him. The high priest of the shrine of Cape States, the chief deacons, the 9 nephews of the Ramos family, and Amon were all gathered around the table, while Roddick sat next to Julian as a witness. In front of an 8th-level supreme mage, Amon did not dare to use detection magic to pry into what was going on. He just stared intently at the spatial ring. The result was a little disappointing. There was no new discovery. Julian just picked up the ring, closed his eyes, and with a gentle shake of his hand, the contents were taken out. This was similar to Amon taking things out of the bone. He took out everything in the ring at once. Amon sensed that this supreme mage was using advanced spatial magic, and his magic power was very strong. It seemed that Nero's spatial ring was far less precious than Amon's bone. Even a third-level mage who had just mastered spatial magic could barely use that rib. Everything was taken out of the spatial ring, and with a crash, it instantly filled half the table. Everyone let out a stifled gasp, and most of them held their breath. There were only two things left behind by Nero: a variety of scrolls and a pile of scattered parangons. At a glance, there were estimated to be more than 70 scrolls, nearly half of which were advanced magic scrolls. There were also hundreds of parangons, among which there were 4 aquaticore and 2 flame sprites. What an amazing wealth! Special parangons were expensive enough, but the value of scrolls was far greater than parangons. As a supreme mage, Julian naturally knew that. He was so surprised that he almost jumped up. Hilary, on the other hand, almost fainted from the shock. Her eyes were fixed on the aquaticore and the flame sprites. Roddick, on the other hand, was the calmest. He coughed softly and reached out to pick up a scroll from the table. After opening it, he glanced at it and said, "This is Lord Nero's will. It says, 'Read and notarized by Lord Roderick,' which should refer to my father. I didn't expect to see it after so many years. Thank you, Lord Nero, for your trust. I will read it today." Nero's will was very simple. He divided all the scrolls into 5 parts: 2 to the shrines in the Cape States, which was his contribution as the chief priest, 2 to the heir of his family, in the hope that there would be an outstanding mage in the Ramos family to inherit his career, and the last to the person who returned the scrolls, which was a token of appreciation for his selfless and noble character. The parangons were divided into 3 parts, 2 for the Ramos family, and 1 for the person who returned the scrolls. Nero's reward was very generous, but from another point of view, it was also reasonable. If the person who returned the scrolls did not return them, he could keep them all for himself. At the end of the will, there was one more thing mentioned. He hoped that the chief judge of the Cape States could make an exception and let the person who returned the scrolls have access to his personal records of making the scrolls. He also specified which article it was. Presumably, it was to explain the use of the nameless gray scroll. This was Nero's intention. In his message, he once said that the gray scroll was more precious than the staff and the ring combined, but only after returning the relic could one know how to use the scroll. He was worried that the person who got the relic would not return it. After the will was read, Roddick handed the scroll to everyone and asked them to read it. However, Amon did not read it at all, because he had already said in advance that he did not know Igut's cursive script. Amon lamented in his heart. He felt that the distribution in the will was too unfair. He did not know Amon, and he was a lowly foreigner, but he got more than any of Nero's nephews. But in front of everyone, he could not say no. So he pointed to the parangons and said, "I don't know the value of the scrolls, but I do know the number of parangons. There are a total of 103 parangons here. If we divide them into 3 parts, each part will have 34 parangons, and there is 1 extra. Amon, you take the 35 parangons and leave the blue and red ones." Roddick frowned and glanced at him. A contemptuous sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. Tushuan Ramos said, "Cousin, don't you feel ashamed to say that? The value of special parangons is completely different from that of ordinary ones. Everyone here knows this. Since Uncle's will was notarized by Lord Dick, the distribution of the parangons should also be decided by Lord Dick." Roddick did not say anything. He would not count the parangons himself. He asked the clerk, Fayal Judah, to stand up and count the total value of the parangons on the spot. The value of the special parangons was different. The most valuable was the ventuscule. Because it could be used to make spatial objects, it was very rare, and it was worth 500 ordinary parangons. The Taraculus was worth 300 ordinary parangons. The flame sprite and the aquaticore in Nero's belongings were worth 200 ordinary parangons. There were a total of 97 ordinary parangons for aquaticore and 2 flame sprites. The total value was 1,297 parangons. If they were divided into 3 parts, Each part would have 432 ordinary parangons, and there was one extra. After the clerk finished counting, Roddick first asked Amon, "Generous and selfless foreigner, how do you want this reward?" Amon was also stunned. He did not expect Nero's belongings to be so valuable. He mainly wanted the scrolls, but he could not show it. Hearing the mayor's question, he answered, "These colored parangons are so valuable that I don't want too much. I just want a red one and a blue one. It's convenient to carry them around. Forget about the small change. Thank you to the servants in the mayor's mansion. Lord Dick, please give them to me. Thank them for taking good care of me these days." Amon was straightforward and beautiful. He only asked for one aquatic ore and one flame sprite. The reason he gave was also very reasonable. It was convenient to carry them around. No matter who it was, it would not be easy to carry more than 400 parangons on a journey. If they were exchanged for gold coins, one person would not be able to carry all of them. One would have to use a carriage. Amon generously gave the remaining 32 parangons to the servants in the mayor's mansion. Roddick was very satisfied. Amon took all the servants in the mayor's mansion with him. No one could object. Tushuan Ramzan also took the initiative to say, "The Ramzan family should also take out double the odd sum, a total of 64 parangons, and let the lord of the city reward his aides and servants as thanks for notarizing the will. The remaining 801 parangons can be divided into 9 parts. Each of us can take 89 parangons." Several of Nero's nephews secretly glared at Tushuan, but no one openly objected. Thus, the parangons were divided. Next was the distribution of the scrolls. Roddick said humbly to Julian, "My dear lord, you are a supreme mage. You know the use and value of the scrolls best. I don't have the ability to distinguish them so clearly, so please be the judge." Julian looked at the scrolls with a look of desire in her eyes. She smiled bitterly and said, "The value of the scrolls is not as clear as the parangons. Sometimes they cannot be bought with money. In different situations and in the hands of different people, the meaning of the scrolls is completely different. Since it is not easy to calculate, I think we should use the simplest method. Here are 36 supreme scrolls and 38 intermediate scrolls. They will be divided into 5 parts according to the number. The mayor will represent the Shrine of Cape, and take the first 2 parts. The Ramos family will take the second 2 parts. The outsider Amon will take the last one. As for the small change, the mayor will decide what to do with it. Chapter 82. I only ask for one thing. Roderick glanced at Aria, then looked around and said, "I have a simpler way. Regardless of whether it's a high-level scroll or a low-level scroll, divide it into 5 portions, and each portion will have 6 scrolls. As for the rest, consider it as a token of gratitude to our respected Supreme Mage Julian. If Lord Julian had not opened the ring, none of us would have been able to get the relic. Is there anyone who would object?" He was an experienced man. He had long known that Julian wanted these scrolls, so he gave the Supreme Mage 6 Supreme Scrolls and 8 Intermediate Scrolls, making Julian submit to him. Why not do something generous at the expense of others? The Ramos family and Amon did not dare to object. Amon naturally would not object. No matter what he got, it would be an unexpected gain. The nephews of the Ramos family did not dare to object either. Roddick made the final decision. He casually divided the scrolls on the table into 5 portions, each containing 6 Supreme Scrolls and 6 Intermediate Scrolls. He personally handed the rest to Julian. Julian was overjoyed. He thanked Amon and accepted the scrolls with a smile. These scrolls were the wealth of the Empire's most outstanding scroll maker, Nero. As the high priest of the Temple of Isis, although Julian was very rich, the value of this batch of scrolls was at least 7 or 8 years of his total income. What's more, he might not be able to buy it even if he had the money. Roddick took 2 portions on behalf of the Cape States and ordered his people to keep them safe. The nephews of the Ramos family took 2 portions. Amon took the last portion and carefully put it in a bag he carried with him. Julian looked at Amon and muttered in his heart. His first impression was that this outsider was very difficult to buy over. Although in the eyes of this lord, almost everyone could be valued by their own interests, The price to buy over Amon was too high. This was because this outsider already had an astonishing amount of wealth, and he did not seem greedy. Otherwise, he would not have returned the staff to the Cape States. How was he supposed to deal with this man? Since it was difficult to tempt him, he could only threaten him or try using other methods. Before Julian could say anything, Obama muttered, "There are 9 people and 24 scrolls. How are we going to divide them?" Roddick replied with a smile, "That's not a problem. If you don't want to keep the scrolls and want money, I'll buy some in the name of the Shrine of Cape. I'll also buy some personally. Buying so many scrolls at once will cost an astonishing amount of money. I naturally won't let you suffer a loss, but you don't need to be so calculative." Hillary said happily, "As long as the city lord offers a fair price, why would we care? Let's exchange the scrolls for money and it'll be easier to divide them." Tussing shook his head. "I want to keep some of my uncle's scrolls as a memento of my family. I'm willing to buy some from you at the same price as the city lord. But I don't have that much money at the moment, so I can only buy a few." Roddick smiled. "I almost forgot that there are 2 mages among you. Of course the scrolls will be useful. If anyone wants to buy the scrolls from us, you can bid first. These belong to the Ramos family anyway. I won't fight for them." Tussing hurriedly explained, No. How would I dare to bid in front of the city lord? I'll bid whatever the city lord bids. Let's exchange all the scrolls for money. Besides my own share, I'll buy a few more." In the end, Tussing paid a sum of money to keep 2 advanced scrolls and 3 intermediate scrolls. The rest of the scrolls were bought by Drick. Most of the scrolls were bought by the church, and a small portion was bought by Drick himself. Roderick knew very well that the value of these scrolls was not only in money, but also in the fact that they could allow a low or advanced mage to cast advanced and supreme magic instantaneously without consuming his own magic power. If any conflict broke out in the future, the scrolls stored in the city would be a great weapon for both offense and defense. Julian looked at Roddick again and thought to himself, "This city lord is really quick." He bought the scrolls from the Ramos family at the first opportunity, using the wealth of the city stored in the shrine. Could it be that the city lord was preparing for battle? If one day 2 armies were to face each other, sending a group of mages with scrolls to launch a surprise attack would have the effect of winning the battle. On second thought, Julian thought of another possibility. It wasn't easy to come across such scrolls in normal times. The Ramos family sold them in large quantities at once. They didn't even carefully distinguish the use of each scroll. They only sold them at the prices of advanced and intermediate scrolls. Although Roddick paid a huge sum of money, the price he got was very cheap compared to other situations. Roddick then used his identity and connections to read the scroll-making notes left by Nero, and privately sold them to the mages in a large city. He could definitely sell them at a much higher price than today's purchase price. The more Julian thought about it, the more she admired and envied the city lord. She regretted that she had acted too late. Then she thought about Amon again. After the scrolls were sold, Julian coughed and said, "There is one last item in Lord Nero's will. It's to let the person who returns the scroll read one of his personal notes. It's about the making of a certain scroll. Amon, do you want to read it? By the way, where is the scroll? Do you have it with you?" Wasn't he asking the obvious? Amon had already said that the 3 scrolls were lost in the mountains and could not be found. Amon looked up at Julian and suddenly became alert. There was an indescribable danger in the eyes of the supreme mage. It was like a mouse being stared at by a cat. Amon had brought out a special ability from the underworld that allowed him to sense the changes in people's emotions. Although he didn't know the exact thoughts of Julian, he could sense that Julian was up to no good. He replied very cautiously, "I have already reported to the Castellan that Lord Nero did leave behind 3 scrolls, but I lost them deep in the mountains when I escaped from danger, and I can't find them anymore. I won't read the records. I can't understand them anyway. There's no need to read them." Although he wanted to know the specific purpose of the gray nameless scroll, he simply cut off the idea in this situation. A commoner who didn't know magic couldn't use scrolls in the first place. Besides, the scrolls had been lost. If he still wanted to read the records written in Igut's hieroglyphs, It would be suspicious. The people sitting here were a group of cats, and he was the mouse in the middle of the cats. The notary of the will, Roddick, saw that Amon didn't want to read Nero's private notes anymore. He didn't force him and asked kindly, "Amon, Lord Nero's last wish has been fulfilled. As the city lord of Cape states, I should express my gratitude for your actions. What do you want in return?" Amon shook his head and said, "I have already received too much. Lord Nero's gift is beyond my imagination. How can I dare to ask for more? I only have one request, City Lord." "Roddick, just say it. As long as I can do it, I will definitely satisfy you." Amon showed a worried and embarrassed expression. "I know that the staff is very valuable, but I didn't expect Lord Nero's relic to be so precious. To be honest, when I came here, I carefully hid the staff and didn't dare to let anyone know. Now that I have so much money and valuable things on me, I'm a little worried. Can you let me leave the Cape States safely?" It was a little rude to ask this in public, but it was normal for a stranger to have such worries. Roddick's face slightly sank. "What are you talking about? The city should be thanking you. Why would we make things difficult for you? Lord Nero's will has been fulfilled. You can leave whenever you want. If you're worried, I can send guards to escort you." Amon smiled like a child. "Thank you, my lord. That's what I wanted. There's no need for guards to escort me. The city under Lord Drick's rule is the safest place. I want to leave today. When I return to my hometown, I will be the richest man in the city." Amon said he wanted to leave. Roddick had already said it in public, so it was not good for him to take it back. It was understandable that a stranger would be eager to return to his hometown after suddenly obtaining an astonishing amount of wealth in a strange city. Julian wanted to find an excuse to detain Amon, but he did not expect Amon to make such a request in public. The Supreme Mage rolled his eyes and said with a smile, "Amon, your noble and selfless conduct should be praised and rewarded. Can I ask you a few questions in private?" Amon's scalp tingled at his laughter, but he could only nod and said, "Of course, my lord. Please ask me anything." Julian took him into a quiet room and went straight to the point. "Amon, I'm very interested in Lord Nero's last words in the cave and the scroll you lost in the mountains. Can you tell me the specific location and process in as much detail as possible?" If Amon had made it up completely, it would inevitably reveal many flaws in his story in front of this astute Supreme Mage. But this experience was not made up by Amon himself. It was a paraphrase of Crazy Old's story and Nero's last words. He calmly told it again from beginning to end. After that, Julian ordered someone to bring him a pen and paper, and asked Amon to write down as much as possible of the handwriting he saw in the cave. Amon wrote it again, not revealing anything that should not have been revealed. Julian then asked Amon to draw a map, and asked him how to find the place. Amon explained, "There are many places in the mountains with no roads, and the terrain is very complicated. It's almost impossible to remember it accurately. I'll try my best to draw it for you." He really did draw a map of the deep mountains and forests of the Euphrates Valley. The terrain was quite complicated, and the slightest deviation in the strokes would probably cause a huge gap. It was almost impossible to find the exact place based on this map, but it was already very good for a mountain hunter to draw it. He respectfully handed the sketch to Julian. Julian was still worried and suddenly asked, "Didn't Nero mention bear in his last words?" Amon looked up and asked, "Who's bear?" Julian shook her head. "It's fine if you don't know this person, but did he mention the gods in his last words?" In fact, he wanted to ask about the secrets of the gods, but it was not appropriate to ask directly, so he could only beat around the bush. Amon asked curiously, "No, the last words I saw were all written to you just now." Julian frowned. As the chief priest of the city, how could Nero not mention the gods in his last words? "Amon, are you hiding something? As long as you tell me, I won't blame you." Amon scratched the back of his head. "How would I know? I'm just a mountain hunter. You must know more than I do." Julian stared at Amon, as if trying to see through him. Amon suddenly found that he could not sense the Supreme Mage's emotions. He must be in a state of meditation, and had restrained the information emitted from his body and mind. Julian's magic was much better than Amon's. In front of him, Amon's special ability lost its effect. This discovery made Amon even more vigilant. He was sure that the Supreme Mage was suspicious of him and had other intentions. Crazy Ole's message mentioned this Julian and said that Julian was indebted to Bear. If he encountered any trouble, he could take out the token and ask him for help, but he had to figure out the situation first. In this situation, Amon did not dare to take out the token, lest Julian find out that he had something to do with Bear. Julian looked at Amon and suddenly smiled. "You're just a mountain hunter. The scrolls you got today are of no use to you. They can't be eaten or opened, but they are very useful to a mage like me. But for a mage like me, it's very useful. I'm willing to pay a high price for it. Can you sell it to me at the price Drick just offered?" Amon did not want to agree, nor could he refuse. It was indeed useless for a mountain hunter to keep magic scrolls, but on the other hand, scrolls were not only scrolls, but also very valuable. He thought for a moment, blinked his eyes and replied, "Dear Supreme Mage, in my hometown, buying one item at a time is much more expensive than buying a lot. The more expensive the item, the more expensive it is. Parangons can't be eaten or opened, but they are money, and so are the scrolls. What do you think? If we go to a big place with many mages and sell these scrolls in batches, wouldn't we be able to sell them for a higher price? I'm not short of money anyway, so I'm not in a hurry. Isn't that better? I know you are a noble man, but please tell this ignorant hunter, am I right?" Julian sighed in his heart. This Amon looked simple, but he was not stupid at all. He was already somewhat sure that Amon must be hiding something and needed to be interrogated. Even if it meant torture, he must extract valuable clues from the boy's mouth. If Amon knew about his past with Bear, even if there was a trace of possibility, he could not stay in this world. Since Amon had asked this question, Julian really could not say that his idea was wrong. He could only smile and say, "Amon, you are very smart and even more rare, honest and selfless. You are indeed a good boy worthy of praise. I heard you say that you are leaving today. I wish you a safe journey, and the gods will protect you." As he said this, Julian had already made a decision. It would not be good to do anything to Amon in public, but after Amon left the city, he would intercept him in a secluded place and interrogate him secretly. Because the matter he wanted to ask was of great importance, the Supreme Mage even wanted to do it himself. Anyway, his tour of the Cape States had ended and he would leave tomorrow. He would have to do something on the way, and no one could question him. Even if he rode a fast horse, it would still take him several days to leave the Cape States. No matter what, Amon would not be able to escape the hands of the Supreme Mage. When the time came, he would use all means to interrogate him. No matter what, he must not let Amon live. Julian was thinking so and was about to bring Amon back to the hall to say a few words of encouragement and praise, when suddenly he heard someone outside reporting loudly, "Lord Julian, the latest edict of the Adoratress has been sent to the Cape States. It is for you and Lord Drick." Julian was taken aback. He had completed his tour, and was going back tomorrow. Why did the young Adoratress, Maria, give the latest edict at this time? Did something major happen? He hurriedly tidied up his clothes, and went to the main hall to receive the edict of the Adoratress. Lord Drick led a group of officials from the city and the shrine to get ready respectfully. Roddick was already aware of the edict of the Adoratress. He tactfully reprimanded the young governor for his shortcomings in handling the affairs of the shrine, and praised the achievements and talents of the High Priest Julian. He ordered Julian to stay in the Cape States for a year to guide and supervise the affairs of the shrine. This order was far beyond Julian's expectations. He had just obtained a batch of precious scrolls in the Cape States today. He was in a good mood, but suddenly he felt as if he had been hit by a stick. The order had been officially issued, and he naturally could not openly disobey it. He did not want to stay in the Cape States for a year, and he was afraid that something bad would happen if he stayed far away from the Temple of Isis. It seemed that he could only send a letter back to Montefiore to discuss with the other two high priests, and find an excuse to ask the Adoratress to transfer him back in advance due to an urgent matter. There was also a small problem ahead. He was afraid that he could not kill Amon himself. He could only send someone else. As for the interrogation and killing, he must let his most trusted confidant do it. This secret could not be leaked in the slightest. The messenger who came to deliver the order was the deputy director of the archives of Montefiore. He was also a prominent lord. Roddick naturally had to entertain him well. At the same time, he also planned to hold a grand banquet to thank and welcome Lord Julian for staying in the city. From afternoon until late at night, the officials of the city were very busy. The governor was once again too busy to go home. Of course, no one had the time to care about Amon. What Amon did not know was that Maria had given him the order at the right time. It could be said that she had saved him this time. Julian, the supreme mage, did not have the time and opportunity to capture him personally. But he himself was prudent enough to leave Cape that afternoon, in the carriage which Tashin Wellington had sent him, with his few belongings and a cat. The servants in Roddick's mansion were a little reluctant to see the young man go, because they had heard that Amon had given the governor a huge sum of 32 parangons. Everyone could get a large sum of money, especially the gatekeepers who led Amon's carriage all the way to the intersection. They even watched him leave with tears in their eyes. Chapter 83. That night, after the grand banquet, Roddick was tired, so he stayed in the backyard of the shrine to rest. The shrine was not just a shrine. It was the largest building complex in the city. There were also many courtyards and garden-like buildings for the priests to live in. Lord Aria took the opportunity to meet several more people in private after the banquet ended. Among them were the oldest priest of the Shrine of Cape, Judah Fayal, the clerk of Roderick, Obama, the current patriarch of the Ramos family, and Hillary, Obama's youngest brother, among others. It was an honor to be summoned by Lord Julian alone. The content of the conversation was not open to the public, but it was more or less related to Amon. Julian asked the oldest priest who was present when Nero's last words were first read. He asked Fayal Judah about what Amon had reported to Roddick. He carefully compared what Amon had said to him to see if there were any discrepancies. If there were discrepancies when Amon talked about how he obtained Nero's relic twice, it would be suspicious. Judah Fayal took the opportunity to say, "I don't think that foreigner is simple. He has been staying in the inn for several days, and could have delivered the staff to Lord Drick's mansion at any time. But he waited until the day of the monthly shrine festival to stop the carriage of the lord of the city in front of everyone. What a cunning man. I suspect that he did not tell the whole truth. He must have seen something else in the last words of Lord Nero, or he got something else." Julian said quietly, "Do you think we should investigate this matter? He is not from my gut. If he really knows something that he shouldn't know, it will be very troublesome to announce it in a foreign country." Judah Fayal had his own selfish motives. Hearing these words, he couldn't help but think of a way to please him. The best way is to ask him himself, of course, or make him unable to talk forever. But this must not be made public, or it will affect the reputation of the lord of the city and you. Julian glanced at Fayal and changed the topic. "I'm just asking. I don't want to do anything. But I see that Obama and Hillary are very dissatisfied with Amon, right?" Fayal Judah nodded. "Yes, they have suggested that the lord of the city should imprison Amon for interrogation, but Lord Dick rebuked them." Julian smiled. "Lord Dick is wise. He should have rebuked such a rude and stupid suggestion. How could he let the lord of the city ruin his own reputation? As a ruler, his reputation among the people is priceless, so he can order and forbid them. Let Obama and Hillary come in. I'll be staying in Cape for a long time. I may need your help in many things in the future." Judah nodded repeatedly. "It is Judah's honor to be of service to you, my lord." Julian then summoned the two nephews of the Ramos family, and chatted about some irrelevant gossip. She expressed her condolences to the Ramos family, and congratulated them for finally obtaining the relic of their ancestor after more than 30 years. Then, she expressed her emotions about what happened during the day. Naturally, she also mentioned the outsider, Amon, who left immediately after receiving the generous gift. They had already drunk a lot of wine that night. The Ramos brothers were getting more and more agitated as they talked. They believed that Amon had come to the Cape States to return the staff because he could not open the spatial ring himself, and did not dare to ask a supreme mage for help. Nero must have mentioned something else in the cave, but that cunning outsider didn't say anything. They really should have detained this person and interrogated him, but the city lord didn't allow it. Julian smiled faintly and said, "The city lord's decision is very wise and reasonable. You shouldn't be rude to Amon in public. But you should find out the details of Lord Nero's last words in the cave. They were left by your ancestor. You have the right to ask about them. But the city lord has already ordered that there are some things that cannot be leaked. My opinion is the same as City Lord Dick's." The brothers seemed to have thought of something. They exchanged glances and chatted for a while longer before they left. After the Ramos brothers left, Julian summoned his confidant Vitru, who was also a senior priest of the Temple of Isis and a 6th-level mage. Vitru nodded solemnly. Finally, Julian said, "You must be careful when dealing with Amon. He was able to cross the desert and arrive in the Cape States safely with the staff. He is at least an advanced warrior. I can see that he has learned body arts." Vitru said, "There can't be too many people involved. I will take a few elite warriors with me. They will be your personal guards. You will stay in the city and not go out for the time being. Give the accompanying warriors a few days off, so that no one will suspect anything." This time, Arya had not only brought 2 mages with him, but also a personal guard of 12 warriors. He himself was an 8th-level supreme mage, and he walked on the official roads of the Empire, so he did not need this kind of protection at all. However, the pomp and ceremony that a high priest of the Shrine of Isis should have was still a must. The supreme mage thought for a moment and said, "Then let Haven lead the team. He is only 1 step away from becoming a 7th-level supreme warrior. If he succeeds, he will become a supreme warrior when he returns. I will find an opportunity for him to replace Gabriel. Gabriel has been protecting the Adoratress wholeheartedly. He has become Maria's right-hand man. The one who should be sent out from the Temple of Isis is Gabriel. Let's not talk about this now. Let's talk about your plan first." Vitru agreed. "Haven is the captain of your guards. Of course he is trustworthy. Let him lead the team and pick 3 warriors. I will be safe with him by his side. Haven is also a hunter. He has learned many skills in the Temple of Isis. He is an expert in tracking and assassination. No matter where that Amon goes, no matter how well he hides, he can't escape." Arya nodded in satisfaction, then cautioned, "Haven has also undergone the 2nd awakening of his power. He can use low-level magic, and he can use mid-level scrolls as well. He should have no problem working with you. But don't underestimate him. Amon has a lot of scrolls in his hands. Be careful of those scrolls." Vitru was puzzled. He is not a mage. Scrolls won't help him. Julian shook his head. "How can you be sure that no mage is behind this? If he is an advanced warrior, he may have gone through the 2nd awakening of his power, and can use elementary magic. He can also use intermediate scrolls." Haven was surprised. "My lord, do you suspect that he is a sorcerer?" Julian's face darkened. "It's always good to be careful. As for whether he is a sorcerer or not, you will know when the time comes. Here are 3 scrolls. 1 advanced scroll and 2 intermediate scrolls. Take them well and give 1 intermediate scroll to Haven in case he needs it." Vitru hurriedly declined. "These scrolls are very precious. My lord, you should keep them for yourself. We don't dare to use them." Julian insisted. "It's best if you don't use them. I don't want to waste them on Amon. I'm just giving them to you just in case. Anyway, it's not a big deal even if you use these scrolls. Amon has more scrolls. As long as we can capture him, we won't lose anything." Vitru took the scrolls and asked, "Is there anything else you want, my lord?" Julian smiled coldly. "If Haven tracks down Amon, you can leak the information to Obama Ramon. But don't let him know who sent the information. I'm sure he will track it down as well." Vitru was puzzled. "What do you mean, my lord? Don't you want to keep it a secret?" Julian replied, "Of course I want to keep it a secret. No one can find out what you are doing. But if something goes wrong, for example, if you use the scrolls too loudly, someone will have to take the blame, right? Even if someone investigates, they will only find out that Obama was secretly tracking Amon." Vitru gave a thumbs up. "My lord is wise." Julian continued, Tomorrow morning, I will give the guards a day off. Let them travel around the city to relax. As for you, I will send you back to Montefiore to report on some matters. Also send a secret letter to the other 2 high priests. After you leave the city, meet up with Haven and take care of Amon. Lord Julian suddenly received an order from the adoratress to stay in the Cape States for a year. He didn't make any preparations beforehand, so he sent Vitru back to Montefiore the next day to report on some matters and bring back some things for him. Vitru left early in the morning. The benevolent Lord Aurea was compassionate to his subordinates. He even gave his bodyguards a break and allowed them to wander around the city. Roddick, who had been working hard for many days, finally returned to his mansion. His attendants and advisors also returned to his mansion. When Aristotle entered the gate, he was stopped by a gatekeeper. The gatekeeper said to him respectfully, "My lord, when Mr. Amon left yesterday, he asked me to pass this to you." The gatekeeper handed Amon a box made of coconut shells. The craftsmanship was very beautiful. It was a little thing that Amon bought a few days ago. It was sealed with glue, so he didn't know what was inside. He had to cut open the seal with a knife. Amon didn't greet Aristotle, but left him something before he left. Aristotle was very surprised. He hurried back to his room and opened the box. Lying quietly in the box was a divine stone shining with a watery luster. It was the extremely precious aquaticore. Picking up the blue divine stone, there was a small slip of paper with a short sentence written on it. "Thank you." Aristotle realized that Amon had already recognized him. Before he left the parangan and the aquaticore to thank Aristotle for saving his life. Aristotle's expression was very complicated. He suddenly stomped his feet and walked out. He went to the backyard and asked to see Roddick. He knew very well that the governor had been tired for the past few days and had just laid down to rest. He also knew that Amon had left yesterday and should be far away from the city by now. He had planned to wait for Drick to wake up before reporting some things, but seeing the things Amon had left behind, he didn't want to wait any longer. If it wasn't for the fact that Aristotle was his most trusted advisor, Roddick would definitely be angry. The servants didn't dare to report to him. But for Aristotle to suddenly ask to see him in this kind of situation, it must be something important. Drick sat in his bedroom, put on his clothes, and called Aristotle in. Aristotle apologized as soon as he entered the room. Then he put the small box on the table and opened it. "My lord, please take a look. This is what Amon asked the porter to give me before he left." Roddick saw the aquaticore at first glance. He was startled. He picked up the note and looked at it. He asked in confusion, "Sir, what's this about?" Aristotle sighed. "I'm afraid my lord doesn't remember, but Amon used to be a miner in Duk. He was the one who mined the god's tear. He was the adoratress servant for 3 days. He thanked me because I saved him in Duk. I've mentioned this to you before. That child has grown up and is almost unrecognizable. But he knows me." He briefly told the story of the past. Roddick's eyes widened. "What a coincidence. I heard that Duk was destroyed by the flood, but Amon is still alive. What a blessing from the gods." When he mined the god's tear, it was also the blessing of the goddess Isis. Why didn't this child tell me about his past? If I knew, I would have thanked him even more. Aristotle said, "He didn't tell me because he had concerns, or he didn't want to remember the disaster in his hometown. But this child is like a messenger of the gods to you. He was the one who mined the god's tear, and today he is the one who returned the staff of the Oracle of Duk. You have to protect such a person no matter what. Think about what he has brought to you." Drick raised his head. "What do you mean? Did something happen?" Aristotle pondered. "To be exact, I don't know what will happen. It's just a personal guess and I don't want to say it. But seeing this thing, I have to say it, or I won't be able to sleep peacefully. Lord Julian also summoned several people in private yesterday. I'm afraid it has something to do with Amon. You can ask Judas, or better yet, Lord Aurea himself, as to the details of the affair. I hope that nothing will happen that will damage your reputation and disgrace God's favor. I hope that all this is just me being paranoid." Roddick's expression became solemn. He waved his hand. Go out and call Faal Judah. Faal Judah was surprised to be summoned in Roddick's bedroom. After he bowed, Roddick asked directly, Lord Julian summoned you last night. What did they talk about? Faal did not dare to hide anything in front of him. He reported his private meeting with Julian, and tried to relay every word in detail, only omitting the part where he said bad things about Amon. Finally, he carefully explained, My lord, it was you who asked me to take care of Lord Julian's daily life, and try to satisfy all of his requests. I can see that Lord Julian is worried about Amon, but I also advised him not to do anything that would damage your reputation. Roddick nodded. I understand. Tell the guards to prepare a horse. I'm going to see Lord Julian. Julian was sleeping soundly when he was woken up by a servant. He was about to lose his temper when he heard that it was Drick who had come to visit him urgently. In the reception room, after sending the others away, Roddick went straight to the point. Dear Supreme Mage, do you wish to pursue Amon? Is there anything I can do for you? Arya was taken aback by this question, but he immediately smiled and said, City Lord Drick, in your city, everything is really under your control. But I'm very curious as to why you would ask such a question. Are you suspecting me of something? Roddick hurriedly shook his head. No. No matter what Lord Julian does, there is always a reason. I should provide assistance. I just want to say one thing. If Amon is harmed, it will damage the reputation of the city, the shrine, and you. It is not worth it. Arya was still able to laugh. He smiled and added, This will be a serious blow to your reputation, Lord Castellan. Of course, I understand that. So please rest assured that no matter what happens, the situation you are worried about will not happen. Can I make such a promise? Roddick did not say anything. Julian smiled faintly and said, Lord Drick, I have been ordered to stay in the Cape States for a year to supervise and guide the affairs of the shrine here. I would like to ask you one thing, just a hypothetical question. Between me and a foreign hunter, whose will you protect? Roddick lowered his head and said, Why would I ask such a question? Of course it will be you, the noble Lord Julian. There is no need to even say it. In fact, I have always hoped that you can become the chief priest of the Cape States. The return of the staff at this time symbolizes the will of the gods. Roddick's sudden mention of this matter surprised Julian a little. He laughed and said, In just a few days, especially after seeing the relics of Lord Nero, I already know that being the chief priest here is no less than the high priest of the Temple of Isis. But I have no choice. This is not something I can decide myself. I need the order of the Temple of Isis and the approval of the pharaohs of Igut. So it is useless for you to ask me personally. Even if I am willing, I can't agree. Roddick raised his head and said, As long as you are willing, I hope I will not be disrespectful. If that day really comes, I will still need your full support for everything in the Cape States. The smile on Julian's face became wider. So Lord Drick values me so much that you are willing to give me the position of the chief priest. Julian is a little flattered. If that is the case, why should we continue to doubt each other? I promise you that I will never do anything that will hurt the reputation of the city and you. But there are two things I have to remind you in private. Roddick, please say. Chapter 84. Julian waved her hand and said, This is just a private conversation between you and me. There is no need for anyone else to know. You know very well that Amon is from a foreign country, and the scrolls left behind by Nero are very precious, and he may also know something that should not be said. If one day a conflict breaks out with a neighboring country, you do not want to see those scrolls on the battlefield, do you? In addition, instead of reminding me, Lord Dick, it is better to care about the nephews of the Ramos family. You should know better what some of them are thinking. Roddick nodded. Thank you for the reminder, Lord Dick. I said these words today, in fact, for your sake. Julian smiled again. Thank you for your consideration, Lord Dick. Fortunately, I understand your noble character. Everything is for my own good. If it were someone else, they might be puzzled. Roddick stood up and said, Sorry to disturb your rest, I will take my leave first. I wish us a happy cooperation in Cape States. Roddick had already understood that Julian might make a move against Amon, which was not what he wanted to see. But Roddick could not stop Julian from doing something that he had not yet done. And even if he did, he would not admit it. Julian only promised that no matter what happened, it would be done in secret and not in public, so that the honor of Roddick and the city would not be damaged. If Julian really made a move against Amon, what could Roddick do? As Julian asked if there was anything between the Supreme Mage and Amon, who would Roddick protect? There was no need to answer this question. Roddick had already tried to dissuade Julian, but if he failed, he could only choose to compromise and pretend that he did not know. Let's hope that Amon is already far away. Let's wish the boy good luck. Since he was able to survive that great flood, let's wish him a smooth escape this time. When Roddick returned to the mansion, he saw that the coconut shell box that Aristotle had sent was still on the table in his bedroom. He felt a little ashamed and silently prayed to the gods. Then he added a generous gift and ordered someone to send the coconut shell back to Aristotle along with the box. On the official road leading to the border east of Cape States, there was a carriage galloping along. The coachman was a strong warrior. The curtains of the carriage were drawn, so it was impossible to see who was sitting inside. There were also 3 warriors following on fast horses. It looked like a wealthy merchant, and his bodyguards were transporting something valuable. However, upon closer inspection, one would find that the carriage was very light and sturdy. The horse pulling the carriage was also 1 in 100, and it ran very fast. Obviously, the warriors had received strict training. Their horsemanship was excellent. They also had a change of horses, as if they were traveling at full speed. No one knew that the man in the carriage was Julian's confidant, Vitru. The warrior in the front was Julian's personal guard, Haven. They were the team that Julian had sent to hunt down Amon. They had been traveling for more than half a day. At a fork in the road, Haven suddenly reined in his horse and stopped. The carriage also stopped. Vitru lifted the curtains and asked, "Haven, what's wrong? Why did you stop?" Haven jumped off the horse and said in a low voice, "The target's carriage might have turned to the seaside. I need to confirm it." The coachman asked curiously, "Captain, how do you know the target has turned to the seaside?" "It hasn't been raining recently. The target's carriage has only been there for less than a day. We can still see the ruts in many places. We just need to check the front and the sides carefully." The coachman asked again, "But there are a lot of ruts here." The coachman was Julian's nephew, and he had a lot of questions. Haven didn't want to waste his breath explaining. He pulled out his saber and slashed at the wheel, leaving a shallow dent. "Drive the carriage forward for some distance, then come back and look at the ruts you left behind," Haven said. The warrior named Shoot really drove the cart for a distance. Then he got out of the cart and looked back. The ruts left in the mud would leave a mark at every distance. Some were blurry, while others were clear. If one looked carefully, they could always be found. Every chariot's wheels would have bumps and bruises on them, so the ruts had their own unique markings. Haven's eyesight was very good. Even though he was riding on a fast horse, he could still accurately spot the marks left by Amon's chariot. Amon did not go to the border as people had expected. Instead, he turned to the north, which was the road leading to the port town. Vitru and the others chased after him. They had set out half a day later than Amon. It wasn't too long, but it wasn't too short either. They could still see the ruts on the road. There was no fork in the road, so they just had to speed up. After half a day, it was already afternoon. The warriors could still hold on, but the horses were tired. They had to change horses and continue. Vitru sat in the carriage and said, "The sun is about to set. That guy should stop and rest. We're very fast. We should be able to catch up with him when he's camping at night." Haven shook his head and said he's not slow either. His carriage and horses are in good condition. We can see that he's running at full speed. We've been chasing him for a whole day, but we haven't gotten any closer. His driving skills are very good. This was an interesting misunderstanding. Amon was a fast runner, but he wasn't good at driving. But he was using the whip given to him by Enril. All he had to do was gently whip the whip in the air, and he could control the horse with ease. It was much easier than a skilled coachman. Vitru frowned. Doesn't he need to rest? Haven replied. He's driving a light carriage. Both horses are good. Tash and Wellington gave them to him. He needs to rest, but don't forget that we also need to rest. We're in the mountains after dark. We can't run at night. We're already half a day behind. Even if he's camping at night, we won't be able to catch up with him tomorrow. Vitru said. Then we must hurry. If he gets to the port, we won't be able to catch up with him. There's something wrong with him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have run away like this. Lord Julian is too wise. They didn't stop to rest until it was too dark for them to catch up with Amon. At daybreak, they changed horses and set out again. Julian's personal guards were only there to protect the mage. Apart from showing off their strength, they didn't suffer much hardship. Of course, it was hard work to travel at such a high speed. Vitru was in the carriage. Fortunately, the rest of them were advanced warriors, so they were able to hold on. What they were worried about didn't happen. After another day of chasing, they found that Amon's carriage had changed direction again. This time, it was heading back to the west. It was a road along the coastline, bypassing the city of Cape, and heading towards the neighboring city of Tnais. Vitru was puzzled. He asked Haven, "What's wrong with this Amon? Does he want to go to Danis instead of leaving the border?" Haven thought for a moment. That's the direction he's going. But he's not going to Danis. Maybe he wants to go somewhere else. Vitru asked, "He's running all the way to Danis. Why doesn't he leave the territory of Igut?" Haven shook his head. He's rich. He doesn't even have a bodyguard. Of course he wants to leave as soon as possible. He probably doesn't know that we're chasing him. He's just being cautious. Just as Lord Julian said, he must have some secrets. Amon didn't know that someone was following him, but he had considered the possibility. Therefore, after he left Cape, he headed east. He traveled at a fast speed and took a detour in a deserted place. Normally, he would be able to get rid of his pursuers. However, he didn't expect to run into Haven's group, who were chasing him from behind. It wasn't easy riding for several days. The warriors were tired. On the third day, they took turns to rest in the carriage. Their speed gradually slowed down. Amon slowed down as well. His horse was also tired. He maintained the same distance for about half a day. The road they took led to the city of Danis. Haven wasn't worried that Amon would run away. After all, he needed to rest in the city. As long as he stayed for a day, he would be able to catch up. There were more and more towns along the way. There were also many carriages and pedestrians. The tracks of the carriages couldn't be seen clearly. Along the way, Haven asked if there was a luxurious carriage passing by. The driver was a young man. Many people had an impression that the carriage Amon was driving belonged to Tushu and Wellington. The only difference was that it didn't have the noble decorations and family insignia, so it was indeed very conspicuous on the road. According to the information he got and the intermittent tracks, Amon was getting closer and closer. Julian's nephew Shoot asked Haven again, "Captain, since you can find the tracks and there are no forks in the road, why do you keep asking?" Haven explained patiently, "People can change carriages and carriages can also change drivers. We're chasing people, not carriages. So far, Amon hasn't changed carriages. His carriages and horses are very good. It seems that he doesn't know that we're chasing him." As they continued to chase, Haven discovered something. Halfway through the journey, Amon camped in the dense forest. The next day, he couldn't find any traces of the carriage, but the tracks were still there. The reason was simple. Amon knew that the carriage he was riding in was very conspicuous. When he crossed Cape from the north, he was worried that someone would accidentally recognize him. So he made some small modifications to the carriage. He had been taught by Crazy Ol. Although he hadn't processed magic artifacts yet, it was easy for him to change the carriage's appearance. The surface of the luxurious wood had been blackened and yellowed. It looked a little old and looked like an ordinary carriage. The shed had also been modified, removing unnecessary decorations. The color was also different from the original. Amon was cautious enough to avoid detection, but Haven and the others were still following him. The distance between them was getting closer and closer. Haven followed the tracks and asked along the way. Finally, he found out that Amon's carriage had changed its appearance. Some of them still remembered the driver. He was a young man, driving with a whip in his hand. There was a branch on the shaft of the carriage. At noon, Haven estimated that they would enter the city of Danis by dusk. On the road in the wilderness, they found another set of tracks. Vitru lifted the curtain and asked, "How far are we from the target, Haven?" "We're getting closer," answered Haven. "Only a few dozen miles away." Vitru waved his hand. "Shoot, stop the carriage. I'll use magic to track him. This distance should be enough." Vitru got off the carriage and walked to the track. He took out an object. It was a parangan with a pedestal, like a lamp. The pedestal was engraved with the pattern of a magic circle. Vitru held the parangan in one hand and waved his staff with the other. The parangan shone brightly, as if a lamp had been lit. A circle of light spread out from the parangan. The image of the ruts was reflected in the aperture, constantly changing. The ruts extended forward intermittently, as if they were chasing after Amon's carriage at full speed. Before long, a carriage appeared in the circle of light. The image changed to show the front of the carriage. The trackers finally saw Amon. The stranger was still wearing the old clothes he wore when he first arrived in Cape States. He had a whip in his hand and a branch on the shaft of the carriage. The warriors praised him in unison. "Lord Vitru, we finally found him. Look, there's a town ahead of him. He might stop there to rest. Let's speed up. We'll catch up with him in no time." Vitru was an excellent 6th-level mage. He could already use advanced magic, but he couldn't use both detection and tracking magic at the same time. He had to rely on a magic artifact to do it. As a senior priest from the Temple of Isis, he was naturally rich. Vitru put away the magic artifact with a complacent look on his face. He smiled and said, "Don't do it in the town. We'll outflank him and wait for him to leave the town. Then we'll capture him in the wilderness. This guy is really hard to deal with. Fortunately, he met me and Captain Haven. Otherwise, he won't be able to escape." A town appeared in front of them. Amon slowed down the carriage. He sat on the shaft and gently caressed Schrödinger. Then he took out a bottle of wine and fed it to Schrödinger. He had traveled so far with great caution. No one should be able to detect him. Schrödinger had been sleeping all this time. Occasionally he would wake up, yawn, stretch himself, eat something, drink some wine, and then go back to sleep. It seemed that Schrödinger was recovering. Amon was relieved. However, Schrödinger didn't lick the wine out of habit. Instead, it suddenly opened its eyes. Its fur stood on end, and it arched its body in Amon's arms. It let out a cry and pointed a paw behind them. It was the first time that Amon had heard Schrödinger cry since they met in the desert. It was also the first time that he saw Schrödinger make such a big movement. At this moment, the cat, which couldn't even be detected by detection magic, seemed to release some kind of aura. Amon's special ability from the underworld activated. He could sense the emotion in Schrödinger's cry. It sounded like a warning, telling Amon that there was danger behind them. Amon quickly pulled over and jumped onto the road to look back, but he didn't find anything. He looked up at the sky again. There wasn't even a bird. Schrödinger was still twisting in his arms, as if it was struggling to get down. Amon gently put the cat on the ground. The weak cat stumbled back the way it came, scratching the ground with its paw at regular intervals. Amon followed and observed carefully. He found that Schrödinger had drawn a line at regular intervals in the ruts. The right wheel of the car he was driving had a triangular gap at some point, and the mark left on the ground was very obvious. Amon suddenly realized something. He picked up Schrödinger, jumped into the car and rode away. As the saying goes, a wise man is bound to make a mistake. Amon had no experience in escaping, nor did he realize that he was fleeing. He just habitually did not want to expose his whereabouts, so he did not consider it thoroughly. After Schrödinger's reminder, he realized that the ruts could also be a clue that could be followed. Vitru and the others galloped to the town. They went around the town and set up ambushes on both sides of the road. Haven entered the town alone to look for Amon. Haven entered the town from another direction with a smile on his face. He didn't find any traces of Amon's carriage, which meant that he was still in the town. But when Haven entered the town, his face suddenly changed. He saw Amon's carriage in the market. He walked over and asked around, only to find out that not long ago, a stranger had sold the carriage at a very low price, along with the 2 tired horses. He only exchanged it for the best horse in the market, and it had already galloped out of the town. Vitru's ambush had failed. Amon had already left. Amon should have entered the city of Danesi. Vitru was flustered and exasperated when he heard the news. That bastard! Did he know that we were following him? Did he play a trick on me? When we catch him and interrogate him, we'll tear him to pieces. Haven's face darkened. He thought for a moment and said, he might not have known that we were following him. He just erased all traces before he arrived at the city. He's a very cautious man. But it doesn't matter. If he enters the city, we'll still be able to find him. Shoot couldn't help but interrupt. Lord Vitru, you can use magic to track him? Vitru wanted to glare at him, but he controlled himself and explained. He's so far away, and there's no detection device. How can I track him? Shoot asked again. Captain Haven, if you can follow the ruts of a carriage, can you also follow the footprints of a horse? Haven said impatiently. There are so many people in the city. How can we find his tracks? Vitru sneered. It's already dark. He must be tired after traveling for so many days. He must be staying in the city tonight. I'm a good friend of the mayor of Danesi. I'll use Lord Julian's name as an excuse to search the whole city. I don't believe he can hide. Haven reminded. We can't do it in the city. This is a secret operation. Let's keep an eye on him. Chapter 85. The name of Alaha the tracker continued on his way, and entered the city of Danis before dark. Haven was an experienced hunter. He actually found the hoof prints left by Amon, and found Amon's horse not far from the north gate of Danis. Before entering the city, Amon had left his horse in the suburbs and entered the city directly on foot. He did not leave any identifiable footprints, completely cutting off all traces of him. The city of Danis was not very large, with a population of about 100,000 people living in the main city. Relatively speaking, it was not as prosperous as the Cape States. Most of the residents in the country made a living by farming and fishing. Amon found a good inn in the city and asked for the best room. After dinner, he closed the door and rested. He didn't wander around. Even on the way, he did not stop meditating every night. Whether it was 5th level body arts or magic, he had reached the peak, but there was no sign of a breakthrough. Bear once said that the higher the level of the power of 2 sides, the more difficult it was. Not only did it require a strong will and perseverance, but it also required some luck and luck. Although it was not as difficult to break through from the 5th level to the 6th level of magic, it was still a very difficult threshold. Becoming a 6th level mage meant that he could practice supreme magic. Naturally, it was not that easy. Fortunately, Amon was not in a hurry. He just did what was in front of him. According to the requirements of practicing the power of 2 sides, the next test he faced was breaking through the limit. This should be a test of body arts. According to Bear, the power awakened in the blood would cause a qualitative change in the body, like a refining of some kind of artifact. This process was naturally not easy. People must bear and break through their own limits, and they must clearly experience and understand all this. But no one would force themselves into an unbearable situation before breaking through. Even if it was by chance, they might get hurt or die if they did not do it properly. It sounded simple, but it was hard to know how to do it. That night, when Amon was meditating, he was extra vigilant. He activated detection magic and paid attention to the movements around the inn at all times. Just as night fell, there was a commotion on the street in front of the inn. Patrolling soldiers opened the door and checked the identity of all the guests. Any suspicious foreigners were taken away for questioning. From the conversation between the innkeeper and the captain of the soldiers, Amon learned that something had happened in the city today. A noble mage's belongings had been stolen. It was a very important magic artifact. The governor of the city had ordered a citywide search. Amon's room was also searched, but nothing was found. The cat snuck out the window, and anything suspicious was hidden in the bone. Amon conveniently hid the bone on the roof. Of course, they also had to search the person. Amon didn't say anything. He just produced a document, the one given to him by Mayor Dusty. Filling in the name would prove that the person was a citizen of the Empire of Igut. The document finally came in handy today. The name Amon wrote was Allaha. Vitru was the one who did it. He found Jonah, the governor of the city of Danis, and claimed that he had returned to the city of Isis on the order of Lord Julian. When he entered the city, he had left several precious magic scrolls in the bag of one of his attendants. The scrolls had been accidentally stolen by a thief. These scrolls belonged to Lord Julian. They had to get them back. No one knew what Vitru had said to Jonah in private, so the search was carried out overnight. The soldiers didn't sleep in the middle of the night, and had to knock on the doors of the city, which would offend the local residents. Of course, they complained, but the order had to be carried out. The owner of the shop gave the captain some benefits, and asked him to be polite during the search. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to do business. The soldiers didn't make things difficult for Amon. After all, he was staying in the best room in the shop, and there was no problem with his ID. They only took a quick glance at him and left. The person they were looking for was a foreigner. This sudden night inspection of the entire city was not without results. Many thieves were caught. Even the city lord's concubine, who was having sex with a coachman in an inn, was caught on the bed by the patrolling soldiers. It could be considered an unexpected harvest. Many suspicious foreigners and young men who happened to pass by the city of Danis were taken out for questioning. Not everyone carried their ID with them. Unfortunately, Amon was nowhere to be found. They couldn't tell the public what they were looking for, and they couldn't go door to door to search for Amon. The city was quiet again after daybreak. What happened during the night made Amon even more vigilant. He had a feeling that he was the target of the search. So he packed up and left the city as soon as the sun rose. He left through the south gate of Danis. There was also a search at the gate. Amon took out the document with the name, Allaha on it, and left the city without a hitch. A man was standing on the gate tower. It was Shute, Aria's nephew. He felt that Amon's back looked familiar. He rubbed his eyes, but he couldn't be sure. When he came back to his senses, Amon was already far away. He had seen Amon in Vitru's tracking magic. But Amon had changed his clothes today, so it was difficult to recognize him in the crowd. When they failed to find Amon last night, having guessed that Amon would leave the city as soon as possible, Vitru came up with another plan. He assigned several men to guard the city gate. If they discovered Amon's whereabouts, they would immediately send a signal to their companions. After all, this matter couldn't be made public. They couldn't arrest Amon at the city gate. They had to follow Amon to a secluded place. By the time Vitru and Haven got the news, Amon was long gone. Haven had no choice but to continue searching for the clues left by Amon. He was really amazing. He actually found the branch in Amon's hand. If it was propped on the ground, it would leave a shallow circular hole. He had seen it several times on the trail leading to the wilderness outside the city. He continued to chase. There were no more traces left. Amon must have put away his staff. At the last trace, Vitru cast a tracking magic again. They saw Amon walking alone on a narrow path in the mountains. He seemed to be walking at a leisurely pace, but he was actually moving at a very fast speed. Vitru's eyes lit up. His eyes lit up. Haven looked at the mountain peak in front of him and said, "That man has entered the mountains. It's not too far. He just went around 2 mountains. But it's impossible to ride a horse, let alone take a carriage." Vitru and the other 3 warriors' faces darkened. They thought that it would be easy to catch Amon, but they didn't expect that it would be so difficult to catch up with him. Traversing the wilderness on foot was something they wouldn't normally do. But Amon wasn't going to follow them. They had no choice but to follow Lord Julian's order. Traversing the wilderness was the best way for Haven to show off his skills. Amon couldn't do it without leaving any traces. The footprints on the grass and the occasional broken twig were all clues to his whereabouts. Whenever Haven lost track of Amon, he wouldn't waste time looking for him. Vitru would cast a tracking magic next to the latest trace and pinpoint Amon's position. They would try to get there as fast as possible. Usually their distance was shorter than Amon's. Since he couldn't see the target, it was much easier to run away than to chase after him. However, he couldn't get rid of Haven and Vitru at the same time. Haven was different from Amon, who was a fake hunter. He grew up as a real hunter in the mountains. He had learned all kinds of tracking and assassination skills in the Temple of Isis. He was very talented and diligent. Now he was only one step away from becoming a supreme warrior. Vitru was an excellent 6th-level mage. He had a precious artifact he got from the Temple of Isis, the Lamp of Death. With the help of the lamp, Vitru could detect Amon's position with the help of detection eyes and information tracking. Traversing the wilderness was different from walking on the main road. Although one could walk fast, the terrain was undulating and winding. Fortunately, these people didn't know how to fly. Unfortunately, there weren't many mountains to the south of the city of Tnais. If the terrain was like the Euphrates Valley, no one except Haven would be able to keep up with Amon. He would be able to shake off most pursuers. But the mountains and forests here weren't steep. Amon could only use the terrain to pick the most difficult path. His pursuers could still keep up with him. Haven was leading the way with a sharp dagger in his hand. He tried his best to choose the shortest and easiest route. Vitru, supported by 2 warriors, cursed Amon as they hurried on. How dare Amon make an honorable lord like him suffer like this? Playing hide-and-seek in the deep mountains and forests? Every once in a while, he would have to use the shadow-chasing lamp to cast powerful magic spells. What a tiring job. Haven comforted him. Don't worry, Lord Vitru. There are advantages and disadvantages to traveling in the mountains. He won't be able to travel at night. But with the guidance of a mage like you, we can still catch up with him. We can take him down in one night. When everyone heard this, they perked up a little. They thought to themselves that the tracking was finally coming to an end. The wilderness was the best place to interrogate Amon. Before killing him, they had to torture this troublesome guy. They had suffered too much along the way. They hated Amon to the core. If Amon knew this kind of resentment, he would definitely find it funny. Just because these people wanted to kill him, he had to walk on the main road obediently and let them catch him comfortably? When it got dark, the tracker started to complain again. Amon didn't stop. He walked almost as fast as he did during the day. Haven was alarmed. He can see the road clearly in the dark. He didn't light a torch either. It seems that he has mastered detection magic. Lord Julian was right. He's a sorcerer. We can't underestimate him. So what if he's a sorcerer? Chute said bitterly. We have Lord Vitru here. Even if he's learned magic, he'll still die. Vitru frowned. What we really need to be careful of are the scrolls in his hands. We can't let him have the chance to use them. We must cooperate with each other. If we can't, we'll use the scrolls first. Since he's a sorcerer, it won't be a problem to capture him. Even if we're exposed, we'll be able to explain ourselves later. Haven reminded again. But Lord Julian said that the interrogation is very important. We can't leak it. We can't let this guy live. No one can prove that he's a sorcerer after we kill him. We have to do it in secret. At midnight, Amon finally stopped. He was tired and needed a rest, so he found a secluded place to meditate and practice the basics of magic. Vitru and the others also stopped. They couldn't keep up. Although they could use detection magic to survey the terrain in the dark, it wasn't very convenient. Vitru's physical strength wasn't as good as Amon's. Amon continued his journey before dawn. Haven and the others followed the trail in the depths of the mountains. It was like a strenuous procession. Maybe it was his intuition, or maybe it was because of Schrödinger's reminder. But Amon couldn't help but feel a sense of nervousness on his back every once in a while, as if someone was watching him closely. They walked for another 2 days. Their pursuers found Amon's campsite every night. He even made a fire to cook. It seemed that he was well prepared. Vitru and the others didn't have much rations with them. If they kept chasing, they would starve. Fortunately, the mountainous area wasn't too large. 2 days later, they arrived at a plain. Amon went back to the main road and entered a town. Vitru and the others were relieved. They followed Amon out of the forest and into the town. They learned that Amon had bought several horses and a carriage. He was driving the carriage himself. This time they learned to be smart. They bought enough dry rations in the small town and bought 2 carriages with the best horses. Then, they drove the carriages and chased after them. Although the carriage was bumpy, it was much more comfortable than walking through the mountains. For the advanced warriors, it was also a kind of rest. To the south of the city of Danis was the city of Bubas. Aman went around the city without stopping and headed straight for the city of Heliopolis, further south. Along the way, except for a short campsite in the middle of the night, there was almost no rest at all, which made the pursuer very tired. Except for Havan, Vitru and the other 3 warriors couldn't bear it. They thought to themselves, is Aman made of iron? Doesn't he get tired? In fact, Aman was also very tired. Unlike the pursuers, he couldn't take turns to rest and drive the carriage. He had been driving the carriage himself. The feeling of danger constantly reminded him of the existence of danger. He wanted to run away as soon as possible. But no matter how hard he tried, the feeling was always there. His physical and mental strength had almost reached their limit. If this continued, regardless of whether there were pursuers or not, and whether the pursuers could catch him or not, Aman would not be able to hold on, and would collapse from exhaustion first. Realizing this, Aman also began to pay attention to conserving his stamina. He did not fly as recklessly as he did at the beginning. Even if something unexpected happened, he had to conserve his strength. At least he had a large number of scrolls to rely on. He had even escaped from the underworld. He should be able to get through this hurdle. The city of Heliopolis was located on the east bank of the Nile River. It faced Montefiore across the river. Heliopolis was the economic and cultural center of the lower Igut. The nearby Nile River delta was rich in resources, developed in economy and densely populated. Aman went around the city again and headed south. He left the carriage at the side of the road and entered the mountains on the east bank of the Nile River. Another chase through the mountains began. This time, Aman slowed down. He rested longer and longer every night. He purposely chose a desolate place. Before he entered the city of Tanais, Aman had already sensed that someone was following him. These pursuers were not simple. They had followed him all the way to the Nile River. It seemed that running away was not going to work. Before he was forced into a corner, he had to find a way to counterattack. He had to use the most scrolls in the mountains. That was the best choice. Aman had his own plans, and so did Vitru. When he was chasing Aman, he noticed that Aman had gone around the city and continued south. He couldn't help but ask Havan, "Where do you think he's going?" Havan thought for a moment. He's going southwest, towards the Nile River. Think about it. If he wants to escape from Lord Julian, where should he go? Montefiore. Vitru suddenly realized. Havan nodded with a gloomy face. If I were him, I would run into Montefiore. It's both dangerous and safe. We don't know who sent him, and we don't know why Lord Julian wants to kill him. Once he enters Montefiore, it will be very difficult to kill him. Lord Julian can't hide everything from Montefiore. As the high priest of the Isis shrine, Aria's status was naturally high, but he could not do whatever he wanted in Memphis. At the very least, there were a few other people who were just as powerful as him. Aria did not have the final say in everything. If Aman entered Montefiore, it would be very difficult for him to carry out his plans secretly. If word got out, Julian wouldn't be able to control the situation. Vitru also thought of this. He narrowed his eyes. It seems that this man's destination is Montefiore. We have to stop him before he crosses the river. But be careful of the scrolls in his hands. Be careful of the scrolls in his hands. It would be even better if someone else attacked first. Havan smiled fiercely. It'll be easier if we know his destination. We can tell Aman to make the first move. We can follow Aman. He slowed down. It looks like he can't hold on much longer. He's been trying to shake us off, but he failed. Obama will come here from the main road. He'll be much faster than Aman. Chapter 86. Kitten Run. Havan and Vitru were superior to Aman in both body arts and magic. Moreover, they were more familiar with the situation in the Empire of Igut. Therefore, they were ahead of Aman. Most importantly, they had correctly guessed Amon's destination. Vitru didn't use the Shadow Soul lamp after entering the eastern bank of the Nile River. He didn't want to waste any more of his magic power. He only asked Haven to follow Amon's trail. The distance between them and Amon seemed to have widened. After 3 days of walking in the mountains, Amon gradually relaxed. He no longer felt like he was being watched. Schrödinger also slept soundly. It seemed that they had shaken off their pursuers. It had been a tiring journey, and he was almost forced into a dead end. Now he could finally heave a sigh of relief. That night, Amon didn't hurry on with his journey. He cooked a delicious meal for Schrödinger and himself. He continued to meditate and practice the basics of magic. After midnight, he lay down and had a good sleep. Before he went to bed, he didn't forget to set up magic formations around him as a warning and a cover. Just before dawn, Schrödinger suddenly jumped up from the ground and shouted. Amon also woke up with a start. The feeling of being watched came back to him. He was startled. Did the pursuers not give up? Did they find us again? Amon packed up his things and put Schrödinger in his bag. The pursuers were terrifying. He couldn't waste any more time. He had to cross the Nile River as soon as possible. Amon ran through the forest with his staff in his hand. He had already taken out several scrolls from the bone and put them in his bag. In front of him was an open field. The foot of the mountain was on the left and right sides. In the middle was a valley. Once out of the valley, he would be close to the Nile River. Amon suddenly stopped in his tracks. He shouted coldly, "Who are you? How dare you follow me all the way here? It's time to show yourself." There was an ambush ahead, but it was discovered by Amon in time. The stalker who had been stalking him like a maggot had finally appeared. He calmed down and raised his branch-shaped staff with one hand. 2 mages wielding staffs and 4 warriors wielding bows and arrows walked out from behind the mountain ridges on both sides of the road. The mage on the left stared at Amon and said, "Boy, you can't escape from me after all. Give me the inheritance of my ancestor, and I may spare your life." Amon's pupils contracted. He looked at the mage and said, "So it's you, Obama. No wonder you were chasing me. If I give you the inheritance of Master Nero, will you spare my life? Will you tell me what you have done in the future?" Obama didn't know what to say. It didn't matter if Amon gave Amon or scrolls or Amon. Now, as long as Amon was still alive, it was the evidence of his evil deeds. In that case, there was nothing to talk about. As long as Amon wasn't an idiot, he wouldn't hand over the inheritance. Obama's face turned red. "I am the patriarch of the Ramos family. You have stolen my ancestors' inheritance. If you give it back, I will let you die a quick death." As he spoke, he raised his staff. The 4 warriors beside him had already drawn their bows and aimed their arrows at Amon. At such a close distance, Amon had no way of dodging the crossbows and arrows of the warriors. Amon was slightly surprised when he saw Obama's staff. It was almost the same as the one he gave to Link. There were 7 parangons inlaid in a spiral shape on the staff. It seemed that this was a very expensive standard staff, or perhaps it was made by the same master craftsman as Link's staff. This kind of staff could greatly enhance the power of all kinds of divine spells, and there was no difference in the attributes. What he didn't know was that the staff in Obama's hand was Nero's personal staff, inherited by the patriarch of the Ramos family. The inheritance that Amon returned was the chief priest's staff of the city's shrine. It was even more precious than Nero's personal staff. At this time, another mage reminded, "Lord Ramos, be careful. He must have used detection magic to detect our ambush. He is a sorcerer." Obama was slightly startled, then he grinned. "A sorcerer? Then I won't need to kill him." Before he could finish his words, the people around him suddenly let out a cry of alarm. The sound of bowstrings being pulled was heard, and the warriors suddenly released their arrows towards Amon. Another mage waved his staff, casting a sea of fire on the open ground. It turned out that Amon had arched his body without warning and rushed towards Obama like a leopard, brandishing the tree branch in his hand. He never wasted time in a fight. The arrows shot by warriors were powerful enough to pierce the heart of an elephant. Amon was rushing forward in a straight line. There was no way he could dodge, but he didn't. At the moment when the bowstring vibrated, He reached into his clothes and took out a silver shield out of thin air. The shield was 7 feet high and 3 feet long, blocking the front of his body. The 4 arrows hit the shield, and a series of buzzing sounds exploded in the air, like a big hammer hitting a huge drum. The echoes were endless, but there was no sound of metal colliding. When the arrows hit the surface of the shield, a silver light burst out. The traces left by the arrows were like stones falling into a calm lake, creating a series of ripples. No one saw where Amon took out the shield. It turned out to be a defensive artifact enhanced by magic. Moreover, Amon could also use magic, which greatly enhanced the defensive effect of the shield. It was too late for the warriors to shoot a second arrow. The only thing that could stop Amon was the sea of fire in the open ground. The other mage's reaction was obviously not slow. They were all Amon's personal servants, but they could only watch as their master was killed. They didn't even have time to protect him. The other mage was called Wuxia, a 4th-level mage and a close friend of Obama. He was invited to help this time, and it was said that he would get a lot of benefits after the success of the mission. Wuxia thought it would be easy to deal with a hunter from the countryside, but he did not expect that Obama, the mastermind, would be killed as soon as they met. His eyes were filled with horror, and he frantically waved his staff as he retreated. Blades of wind danced around Amon, like countless tiny blades slicing at him. At the same time, there were all kinds of flashes of light, making Amon's body feel heavy and his reactions slow. The air became sticky, hindering all his movements so that the warriors could cut him into pieces. This was a reasonable way for mages to cooperate in a battle. Wuxia was obviously very experienced. If the 4 warriors had formed a battle formation and fought with all their strength, they might have been able to fight Amon. But Amon suddenly rushed in front of Obama. In shock, they threw away their bows and pulled out their swords and rushed at him. In their panic, they attacked at different times. Although the interval between their attacks was short, it was enough for Amon to react separately. These people were all low-level warriors, 2 3rd-level warriors and 2 2nd-level warriors. Obama did not know Amon's strength, and he thought that this was like killing a chicken with a butcher's knife. Amon felt his body become heavy, but he wasn't affected much. The air around him seemed to have become sticky, hindering his movements. But he didn't move at all. The sword of the first warrior slashed at him, and Amon pushed the shield in his hand to meet it. The heavy shield hit the tip of the sword heavily. With another flash of silver light, the slender sword was abruptly broken. Amon turned his wrist and lifted the shield. The iron rod stretched out from below and hit the chest of the warrior. It seemed to be a light touch, but the light from the tip of the rod sank into the warrior's body. The warrior spat out blood and fell down, twitching. But Amon did not look at him. He turned around and waved his staff, making a sound of metal colliding. He blocked the sword of another warrior and swept the edge of the shield horizontally, like a huge battle axe chopping at the waist of the warrior. With a miserable cry, the warrior was not cut in two. Instead, his body was folded into a strange shape like a piece of paper and flew out. When he landed on the ground, he had lost his life. The other 2 warriors had just rushed in front of Amon. Seeing this scene, they were terrified and had lost the courage to fight Amon. But everything happened too fast, and they had no time to react. The swords in their hands were still stabbing at Amon. Amon swept his shield horizontally like a heavy iron door, continuously bouncing off the attacks of the 2 swords. He raised the staff in his left hand and waved it in the air. 2 wind blades flew out in succession and cut the necks of the 2 warriors. The wind blades looked like soft kisses. In an instant, deep wounds appeared on the necks of the 2 warriors, and blood gushed out. The rain of blood did not fall on Amon, but was blocked by the light emitted by the shield. The 2 warriors also twitched and fell to the ground. Their bodies trembled violently like prawns suddenly thrown into a pot of boiling oil. Soon they became motionless. The other person died even faster than the 2 warriors. Just as they fell to the ground, Amon suddenly threw the shield in his hand with all his might. The heavy shield spun like a frisbee, striking at the retreating mage with a sharp gust of wind. This was a precious weapon blessed by magic. It was obviously Amon's self-defense. No one expected him to suddenly throw it away in the middle of a battle. At the same time as he threw the shield, Amon raised his staff and a white light sprinkled down, eliminating the negative effects on his body. No matter how fast Amon retreated, he was not as fast as the shield. He was standing too close to Amon, and could not retreat to a safe distance in a short time. He was only a 4th level mage, and Amon's magic was much better than his. At the same time, he was also a 5th level warrior. In a hurry, Amon only had time to raise his staff forward and cast an invisible shield out of thin air. The shield encountered an invisible barrier in the air, and a cracking sound came from an unknown place. Obviously, Amon was standing in the same place and did not touch anything. But as if he was hit by a sledgehammer, he flew out with a scream. After he landed, he knelt on the ground. Then he felt a heat between his eyebrows and the whole world disappeared in his eyes. It turned out that Amon had turned the branch and a flame flew out of the tip of his staff and hit Amon's forehead. The flame only left a scorch mark. Although Guju's body seemed to be intact, the scorching heat had already penetrated his brain and instantly killed him. Before they could finish a cup of wine, Obama and the others were dead, while Amon was unharmed. He did not use the scroll. For one thing, it was unnecessary. For another, he did not want to use the scroll left by Nero to kill Nero's family. A gust of wind blew, rustling the grass and trees in the mountains and blowing the clothes of the corpses. The bodies of the 6 people who were alive a moment ago gradually became cold. There was a sad look in Amon's eyes. He sighed softly, like the wind blowing through the treetops. He straightened his clothes and walked over to pick up the shield. But just after he took 2 steps, he suddenly stopped. He slightly bent one leg to maintain his forward posture. Then he slowly straightened his body. His face was tense and dignified, as if he was facing a great enemy. His hair was almost standing on end. Applause came from the wilderness. Someone said in a sarcastic tone, "Wonderful, wonderful. What an eye-opener. Amon, you accepted Nero's gift but killed the patriarch of the Ramos family. Do you still want to escape today? Lord Julian's vision is really good. He has long seen that you have an unspeakable secret. It turns out that you are a magician. Can you tell me, how can an advanced warrior use advanced magic? I am really curious. Maybe I can use this secret in exchange for your life." Looking up, there were 5 people coming out of the forest. Obviously, their momentum was completely different from the 6 people just now. Amon actually recognized one of them, and the rest looked somewhat familiar as well. He had seen Julian's follower, Vitru, in the Temple of Isis. He had also seen Lord Julian's bodyguards when he left the temple that day. Vitru was in the middle with a staff in his hand. Haven was in the front with a shield in one hand and a dagger in the other. 2 warriors were on either side of him with shields and longswords in their hands. Julian's nephew, Shoot, was behind Vitru with a battle-axe in his hand. They stood a few dozen paces away from Vitru. This distance was enough for warriors to charge, and also within the range of throwing weapons such as spears. It was also the best distance for mages to coordinate their attacks. Amon wanted to launch a surprise attack like he did with Obama and the others, but he didn't have the chance. Moreover, these people were emitting a strong aura. Amon was obviously not their match. Vitru looked at Amon like a cat looking at a mouse that it could toy with. No one could guess what a mouse's first reaction would be when it was stared at by a cat. Amon patted his leather bag and shouted, "Schrödinger, run!" Amon knew that he was in trouble. He might not be able to protect Schrödinger any longer. He had to let the cat escape no matter what. He stood still with the staff in his hand. Suddenly, a cat jumped out of his bag and ran towards the entrance of the valley. It ran faster than a panicked cheetah. Schrödinger's claws fell on the grass without even making a sound. It disappeared in the blink of an eye. It was so loyal that it did not hesitate to run away. Vitru and the others weren't surprised. They already knew that Amon had a cat with him. They just stood there and didn't move. Amon didn't move either. They were here to catch a man, not a cat. Vitru laughed. "Amon, you're really in the mood to care about a cat at a time like this. Think about yourself. What do you think of my proposal?" Haven also shouted, "Please don't move, and don't try to pick up that shield. We can take your life at any time. No matter how good that shield is, It doesn't make any difference. You don't stand a chance anymore. Don't even think about how to escape. We know your whereabouts from Cape to here. You'd better think about how to cooperate with us, lest you suffer more. Chapter 87. A fight to the death. Vitru had asked Amon how he was able to use both advanced body arts and magic at the same time. Amon was so nervous that he didn't seem nervous at all. He bowed to Vitru and said, "Lord Vitru, I didn't expect to see you here. But it's no wonder. How could a bunch of losers like Obama catch up with me? I'm sure there's a master in your team who's good at tracking." Vitru and the others showed complacent expressions. Suddenly, they heard Haven's voice. "Be careful." But it was too late to be careful. Amon bowed and knelt on one knee as if he was saluting. His right hand loosened the staff on the ground, and he took out another silver shield out of thin air. He stuck it into the ground and used it as a shield to protect himself. Then he waved his right hand and threw out several scrolls as if they were petals. Vitru and the others knew that Amon had scrolls with him. They had also mentioned that they had to be on guard against Amon. But in the end they failed. No one had expected Amon to throw out the scrolls so easily. 3 high-grade scrolls and 1 mid-grade scroll. He didn't even blink. He was just speaking and saluting when he bowed. Amon had been studying the new scrolls along the way. He had discovered that none of the advanced scrolls were as advanced as the 2 he had used in the underworld. It was no wonder that Nero would deliberately use them as a reward. Those 3 scrolls were indeed the proudest works of his life. They were extraordinary. Even among the advanced scrolls, none of them were as advanced as the one he had used on the Euphrates River, the Song of Ice and Fire. These scrolls were all standard scrolls that could cast specific magic spells. With so many of them, it was already rare to find them. With Amon's current magical power, it was possible to control 1 high-grade magic at a time, but it was probably impossible to control 2 or 3 at the same time. But Amon, just like in the underworld, only unfolded the scroll to activate the magic, and did not control it. The first scroll was called Dancing Wind Blade. It was a high-level magic that attacked indiscriminately in a large area. The wind in the valley was chaotic. Countless tiny air particles were condensed and compressed like sharp blades, flying in all directions in a disorderly manner. Wherever it passed, the trees and grass were turned into fragments, and smoke rose from the ground. The second advanced magic scroll was Space Fisher. It was also an advanced magic that attacked indiscriminately in a wide area. It was mixed with countless wind blades, distorting the space. Tiny cracks appeared in the air. The branches that were swept into the air were silently dislocated, as if they had been cut in half by some unknown force. The third high-level scroll was Frost Mist. A thick fog rose from the forest, and tiny ice crystals spread out in all directions, like needles that couldn't be seen with the naked eye. Its attack power was not very great, but it had a very good effect of blocking line of sight and interfering with detection, making it difficult for people to find Amon's position, and it was difficult to tell from which direction these attacks came from. The changing wind blades were mixed with the sudden appearance of space cracks. Covered by the frost mist, it was difficult for people to detect them. This was a trick Amon had figured out long ago. He believed that using these 3 scrolls at the same time could achieve the best damage. Moreover, they were the most unexpected and difficult to defend against. Amon unfolded the scrolls and no longer controlled them. This meant that he was also under the attack of the scrolls. But he was prepared. He knelt on the ground and used his heavy shield to block most of the attacks from the front and the top. A light shield rose along the curved surface of the shield and completely protected him. At the same time, Amon quickly picked up the staff on the ground and raised it up. The dust in front of him condensed into a thick and solid wall. This was the advanced magic wall fortification. Obama had just used it, but Amon was much more skillful than him. Even if Vitru knew that Amon could use scrolls, he didn't expect that Amon would use so many advanced magic scrolls at the same time. And he didn't expect that Amon would also put himself under the attack of the scrolls. He didn't care about money, but he also didn't care about his own life. He was willing to spend a huge sum of money to cut people down. Vitru and the others also had scrolls with them, but they didn't use them right away. On one hand, they didn't need them to deal with Amon. On the other hand, they were Lord Julian's magic scrolls. It would be best if they didn't use them. The scrolls that Amon threw out were equivalent to a vast and luxurious manor on fire. Herds of cattle, servants, beautiful women, luxurious clothes, and gold and silver were all turned into mist, blades of wind, and fissures. Amon didn't control the power of the 3 advanced magic scrolls. Instead, he controlled another advanced magic scroll and aimed it at Vitru. He didn't want this brilliant mage to launch a desperate counterattack. At the same time, he didn't want Vitru to have a chance to use the scroll on him. Therefore, he decided to temporarily stop Vitru's attack. This advanced magic scroll didn't cause any damage. It could only temporarily confine the target in a certain space. Amon had used it on the Euphrates River to deal with the serpent monster. Later, Gilgamesh compensated him with a similar scroll. Now he threw it out again. Vitru sensed that the space around him had been constricted. He seemed to have been cut off from the battlefield. In fact, Amon was worrying too much. Vitru didn't have a chance to counterattack. His first choice was to defend himself. Vitru cried out in surprise. He waved his staff. The shields in the hands of the warriors on both sides of him, and heaven glowed with a silver light. The light formed a huge light shield, protecting the entire formation. Vitru waved his staff again, and a set of transparent armor appeared around his body. The armor glowed with a dark brown light and wrapped around the mage's body. Even his eyes couldn't see through the armor. This was the most advanced defensive magic of the air element. Instant shield. When using this magic, the mage couldn't even move, let alone be constricted by the spatial shackles. Heaven's posture was almost the same as Amon's. He was kneeling on one knee and holding a round shield in front of him. In front of the shield, there was also a circle of bright light. The circle of light was small, but it was just enough to protect Heaven. Heaven had also undergone the second awakening of his power. He had mastered a low-level auxiliary magic. His combat skills were quite good. The shield in his hand was also enchanted by magic. It was a strange battle. Everyone on the battlefield was clenching their teeth and struggling. They were like fragile sandcastles that could be crushed at any moment in a gale. Vitru unfurled the scroll. The divine spell didn't last long. The spatial confinement of the intermediate scroll had been shattered by the combined power of the other 3 scrolls. Vitru didn't even need to cast a spell to dispel it. However, the scroll killed one of them. Due to the interference of spatial shackles, Vitru's divine barrier failed to protect Shoot, who was standing behind him. The nephew of Lord Ariya was the first to fall to the ground. A fatal wound appeared on Shoot's forehead. The deep crack in the air almost split his head in half. Countless wind blades left numerous wounds on his body. Shoot died a wrongful death. He was standing in the safest and least vulnerable position, but he didn't expect Amon to launch such an attack. When the crack disappeared, the wind blades dispersed, and the mist still lingered in the air. The most powerful attack was finally over. The seemingly sturdy earth wall in front of Amon had long been smashed into pieces, and the silver light barrier had also shattered and disappeared. Only the giant shield was still intact, protecting his body. The clothes on Amon's right shoulder blade and left thigh were torn. Blood was flowing out, as if they had been cut by a sharp knife. The situation on the other side was even worse. Shoot was dead, and the 2 warriors beside Vitru were lying on the ground with serious injuries. It was hard to tell which was the most fatal wound. The warrior on the left was still holding his sword in his right hand, but his left arm, which was holding the shield, had been separated from his body. The warrior on the right had several deep wounds on his waist. Blood had dyed half of his body red. Only 2 of the opponents were still fighting, Vitru, who was standing, and Haven, who was half kneeling. The clothes on Haven's shoulder were also torn. Blood was seeping out of his right shoulder. The shield in his hand was still flickering with a dim light, but the surface of the shield had already cracked. Although it was a good magic shield, it couldn't compare to the shield in Amon's hand. The items Amon had collected in the secret cave were still intact after the battle against Bear. Although today's battle was fierce, it couldn't be compared to Bear's. No one could have imagined that Amon could not only take out the first shield, but also the second one out of thin air. How could he have so many treasures? The shield should have been taken out from a spatial artifact. Even if Amon had a spatial artifact, he wouldn't be able to open it. For example, he wouldn't be able to open Nero's spatial ring. No matter how hard he thought about it, he couldn't figure it out, and he didn't have the time to think about it. Vitru was the only one unharmed on the battlefield. The transparent armor covering his body was slowly disappearing. The mage's face was ghastly pale. After chasing Amon for so many days, Vitru's stamina and energy had been greatly depleted. Vitru was exhausted as well. If Amon had been a supreme mage, he would have been able to control the direction of the 3 scrolls instead of firing them randomly. Vitru probably wouldn't have been able to stand. Amon didn't give his opponent any chance to catch his breath. He threw away his shield and grabbed his staff. His half-kneeling body suddenly sprang up from the ground. He staggered a few steps when he landed, but he immediately steadied himself and rushed forward without hesitation. His stamina and magic power had been consumed to the limit. Although the shield was good for self-defense, it was too heavy and would affect his speed and reflexes. He threw it away without hesitation. He couldn't give Vitru another chance to use powerful magic. Amon had no energy left to defend himself. Haven reacted quickly. He sprang up from the ground like a leopard and rushed towards Amon with his sword and shield in hand. There were only a few dozen paces between them. He saw Amon take out something from his robe and throw it forward. Thinking that it was another scroll, Haven squatted down and raised his shield to defend himself. However, he didn't feel any explosion of magic. Vitru was also frightened. He didn't have time to launch a counterattack. The parangan on his staff glowed brightly and created another shield. However, the thing in Amon's hand didn't fly out. It was just a long bone. Instead, all kinds of weapons, armors, staffs, parangons, scrolls, rations, wine bottles, a new set of clothes, an old set of clothes, and 2 pairs of shoes flew out. Amon gathered as much energy as he could and swung the bone with all his might. An invisible space opened up, and the things he carried with him flew out. Vitru's magic shield could resist energy attacks, as well as weapons. However, there was a limit to its power. He didn't expect that Amon would throw a hill at him. How could a man throw so many things out of the air with just a wave of his hand? Vitru was scared out of his wits. He saw the flying scrolls and a golden, translucent parangan. It was the god's tear that so many people dreamed of. The god's tear pierced through Vitru's magic shield and hit him in the face. Although the damage was negligible, Vitru couldn't stay calm anymore. His soul flew out of his body. Countless things fell on his magic shield. Vitru's knees buckled and he fell to the ground. Then, the shield shattered and the things fell on him. A spear pierced through his back. The 2 heavily wounded warriors beside Vitru were also hit by the mountain of debris. Heavy axes, spears, sharp swords and sabers were the first things to fall to the ground. The 2 warriors died on the spot. It was hard to tell whether they were killed by the weapons or by the heavy objects. They were seriously injured and couldn't bear such a blow. The scrolls and the parangons scattered on the ground, covering the corpses of the 3 warriors. Amon didn't have time to look at the result of the attack. Haven had jumped up from the ground and was already in front of him. The machete in his hand was shining with a bright light. The machete was short, but the area it covered was astonishing. Amon waved his staff and blocked the machete with a faint light. The sound of the collision was deafening. Amon was knocked back 2 steps. When he landed on the ground, his wound was bleeding again. Amon's staff was much heavier than Haven's machete, but Haven's strength was astonishing. When the machete hit the staff, Amon's internal organs were almost shattered. Haven's martial arts were obviously superior to Amon's. The bone in Amon's left hand fell to the ground. He held the staff with both hands and tried to stop Haven's second machete. Then he was knocked back 2 steps. The wound on Haven's right shoulder started to bleed even more. He switched the machete to his left hand and grabbed the shield with his right. Amon took advantage of the pause and shouted. He swung his staff at Haven with both hands. The sound was like a hammer hitting a broken gong. Haven blocked the staff with his shield and swung his machete horizontally. Suddenly, Amon felt a strange twisting sensation. When his staff hit the shield, It was pulled to the side by a force, almost causing him to lose his balance. He hurriedly dodged to the side, but Haven's blade had already cut through his clothes and left a deep wound on his ribs. Blood gushed out instantly. This man actually knew magic, a simple low-level magic that could be used to support martial arts in battle. If Amon's reaction had been a little slower, he would have been cut open by now. Haven was a true fighter and hunter. He didn't even look back to see how Vitru was doing. He just attacked with all his might. Haven had consumed more energy than Amon when he used the defense scroll. He was injured as well. But now he was gritting his teeth and fighting to see who would fall first. It was Amon's first time meeting an opponent like this. It was a battle of life and death between warriors. Haven's attacks were precise and reasonable. Amon didn't have many opportunities to counterattack. He could only wave his staff and retreat. The continuous impact made him feel weak and dizzy. Blood trickled down from the corner of his mouth. Amon's martial arts weren't very good, but his movements were quick and practical. He could always block the fatal attacks with his staff. Every counterattack was blocked by Haven's shield. The dagger in Haven's hand was more flexible than his staff. Its range of attack was also greater than Amon's staff. When Haven made his move, Vitru and the others didn't cooperate with him. Haven's heart sank. He guessed that all his companions had died. However, he gritted his teeth and didn't look back. His eyes were bloodshot. Under such circumstances, Haven's only option was to defeat Amon. Otherwise, he would die even if he managed to escape. Amon was forced to retreat to the edge of the forest at the foot of the mountain. Behind him was a steep cliff. He couldn't hold on any longer. He discovered Haven's weak point. The wound on his shoulder was very deep. Every time he blocked Amon's counterattack with his shield, his face would contort in pain. The dagger in Haven's left hand gradually dimmed. He was running out of energy. But Amon was in a more dangerous situation. His arms were numb and his body was trembling. He almost lost control of the staff in his hand. Amon had nowhere to retreat. He used his remaining energy to block the dagger and launched a counterattack. The staff hit the shield with an ear-piercing cracking sound. The shield finally couldn't withstand such a long fight and broke into several pieces. Haven's body trembled. He threw away the broken shield and let out a painful roar. He took half a step back and pounced at Amon with his dagger in hand. The dim dagger suddenly shone brighter than ever. This was Haven's final attack. It seemed that he wanted to end the battle with a single slash. Amon's staff was pulled forward by an invisible force. His body was pulled half a step forward. It seemed that he couldn't block the attack in time. Haven had once again used his divine incantation. This was the last bit of energy he had accumulated. Chapter 88. At some point, a layer of ice had formed on the ground in front of Amon. The drifting mist had not completely dissipated yet, and there was a layer of white mist on the ground covering the layer of ice. The surface of the ice had ripples flowing with the mist, as if it was in a half-melted state, making it even more difficult to detect. Haven would have been able to keep his balance on the ice under normal circumstances, but he was already at the end of his rope. He slipped and fell. But he reacted quickly. Even though he could not control his body, he did not give up. The dagger in his hands was still shining brightly, and he swept it towards Amon's waist. Amon arched his body and pushed his staff forward, just in time to block the blade. The blade's aura shattered and the blade slid along the staff. The tip of the blade had already pierced into Amon's chest. If it had gone in an inch further, it would have pierced through his heart and killed Amon. But the battle just happened to end at that moment. Amon swung his staff down and hit the back of Haven's head. The warrior did not even have the chance to make a sound before he died. His dagger flew out of his hand, and his upper body fell on Amon's leg. Amon was thrown to the ground, and he could not get up for a long time. After a long time, Amon struggled to sit up and threw Haven's body aside. The wounds on his shoulders, chest, waist, and thighs were no longer bleeding, but the pain was excruciating. In the life and death battle just now, he had won with the help of magic. His remaining magic power was so weak that he could only cast the simplest magic with his staff. Freezing a layer of ice on the ground was the first magic that Crazy Ol had taught Amon. It was how he had subdued Maki, and today, it was the same trick that saved his life. Amon was so tired that he could not even stand up. He did not care about the corpses and the scattered things. He just sat quietly and closed his eyes to rest. His heavy breathing gradually calmed down. Schrödinger was nowhere to be found. Amon sat there until it was dark. He did not open his eyes, nor did he move. As soon as he relaxed between life and death, he was so exhausted that he didn't even want to move. When the sky was completely dark, Amon stretched out a hand and held the staff vertically in front of him. A soft white light quietly sprinkled on his body. This was a healing magic that he had used most of the day to recondense the magic power he had cast. The wound that was no longer bleeding was slowly healing, but the pain and the injuries in his body were not healed. He put down the staff weakly and began to meditate and practice the divine incantation that he had been practicing every night. While Amon was fighting Vitru and the others, Ariya, who was far away in straits, couldn't help but break into a cold sweat. The high priest of the shrine of Isis had just read Nero's personal notes and found the one mentioned in Nero's last words. Only then did he realize that the scroll Nero left behind was the legendary Tiamat's Wrath. The reason why it was called a legend was because it was almost impossible to make. Only a few people had actually seen it. It was a high-level scroll that could be used by anyone who had mastered advanced magic. However, the Tiamat's Wrath was different from other scrolls. The user's life had to be sacrificed in order to activate it, and its power could not be controlled. It took Nero a few years and countless years of painstaking effort to continuously condense magic power before he succeeded. It was a challenge to prove himself that he had finally reached the pinnacle of scroll making. Once activated, the Tiamat's Wrath would not only burn the user's life, but also destroy all life within its range. It was said that even the gods would be severely injured. Julian thought of a possibility. If Amon was not telling the truth, and the 3 scrolls that Nero had left for him were still in his hands, then the Tiamat's Wrath would be his last resort when his life was in danger. If Amon really used the scroll, he would be dead for sure. Vitru, Haven, and the others would not be able to come back either. If that was the case, then this mission was not worth it. Julian didn't know how to explain the disappearance of the captain and his followers. Julian could only pray to the gods that Amon didn't use the scroll. Either he wasn't a sorcerer, or Vitru and the others didn't give him the chance to use the scroll. Julian suddenly realized that even if Amon was a sorcerer, it was impossible for him to be an advanced sorcerer. Her worries were unnecessary. She laughed at herself and wiped the cold sweat off her forehead. While Ariya, who was in the Sepative Cape, was breaking out in a cold sweat, on a large ship in the Nile River, a young girl also had a surprised look on her face. The luxurious ship was made of cedar wood. The bow and stern of the ship looked like a crescent moon. The hull of the ship was painted a beautiful pale gold, and its surface was engraved with the divine script of Igut, as well as all kinds of complicated magic formations. Apart from the ship below the deck, the ship on the deck was 3 stories high. It was luxuriously decorated, mysterious and solemn. It was the ship of the adoratress of the Temple of Isis, who ruled the shrine of Igut and represented Pharaoh's authority over Igut. The adoratress of the Temple of Isis was presided over by the adoratress of the Nile River twice a year on behalf of Pharaoh. This ceremony was actually a ceremony in which herds of cattle and sheep were thrown into the Nile River to feed the crocodiles. It symbolized the sacrifice to the god of Igut, Osiris, the protector of the Nile River. The adoratress was only there to preside over the ceremony. The priests would lead the people to the river and throw the cattle and sheep into the river. Groups of crocodiles would swim over and fight for the food, tearing at the cattle and sheep with their sharp teeth. This terrifying scene caused the tens of thousands of people to inexplicably feel a deep sense of reverence for the gods in the depths of their hearts. Maria was sitting on a high platform far away from the shore with a staff in her hand and a golden crown on her head. She had no expression on her face. She did not want to see the scene by the river. She just prayed to the goddess Isis in her heart. If it was a few years ago, this delicate and pure girl would never have dreamed that she would be presiding over such a ceremony. But now, as the adoratress of the Temple of Isis, She had no choice but to give everything to the gods. After the ceremony, the adoratress boarded the ship and left the shore. She was going to inspect the Nile River on behalf of the goddess Isis. Tens of thousands of people were still kneeling on the shore, worshipping the adoratress ship until it disappeared into the horizon. The ship flowed along the river. Maria sat on the balcony on the third floor of the ship, looking at the mighty water and thinking about something. Gabriel stood beside her with a sword hanging from his waist. On both sides of the deck below, the attendants of the adoratress were sprinkling various prepared offerings into the river. The offerings were made of dough and sheep fat, symbolizing the legend of Osiris slaying the monsters and protecting the people of Igut. At this moment, the god's tear inlaid on the adoratress' staff suddenly emitted a golden light that shone on Maria's face. Gabriel's black armor also reflected a faint golden light. Gabriel was slightly startled and asked in a low voice, "Your Excellency, what are you doing?" Maria frowned slightly and said, "I didn't do anything, nor did I cast any magic. This is the god's tear's response. It actually affected my magic power." Gabriel asked in confusion, "What's going on? How can the god's tear's response be so spontaneous? I've been with you for so long, but I've never seen anything like this." The god's tear's golden light only lasted for a moment, and then it returned to normal. Maria looked at the staff and said thoughtfully, "I've never seen it either, but it's recorded in the ancient books that this is the guidance and summon of the gods, symbolizing some kind of prophecy. The gods or the emissaries of the gods are coming." Gabriel was surprised. "Your Excellency, you are so calm. How can you be so calm when such a legendary miracle has happened?" Maria smiled slightly. "My supreme warrior, as the adoratress of the guardian gods, you should not be confused or surprised by a miracle. My inner shock is beyond your imagination, but I have learned how to not show it. Just now, I really felt something, as if there was a silent summon somewhere." It had been more than 2 years since they left the town of Duk. Maria was now 18 years old. Her body was more mature than before, but her facial features had not changed much. She could still be recognized at a glance. She was the adoratress of the shrine of Isis, and there was an indescribable sense of solemnity around her. She was now the adoratress of the shrine of Isis, and there was an indescribable sense of solemnity around her. Her eyes were clear and calm, with silent compassion. Under her gaze, people felt that they were being watched by the gods, and they often felt ashamed of their inferiority. This was a change in her temperament, and also a change in her heart. There was always the shadow of the young echo in her eyes, but not everyone could see it. Gabriel asked again, "Where did the summon come from?" Maria stretched out her hand and pointed downstream. "It's in the distance." Maria did not know that the god's tear on her staff suddenly shone with a golden light. At the same time, Amon swung the bone with all his might. The god's tear pierced through the magic barrier and hit Vitru in the face. What Amon didn't know was that Maria was riding a boat along the Nile River, gradually approaching the place where he was. The next morning at dawn, Amon finally stood up with his staff in hand. He heard a buzzing sound. Many flies fluttered their wings and landed on the wounded corpses. 2 stray dogs were tearing Obama's body apart. Alarmed by Amon, they ran back into the forest. Amon looked at Haven's corpse in front of him and sighed. The warrior had almost killed him, but in the end he died at his hands. Haven was the most formidable and respectable opponent Amon had ever met, but he did not know his name. If Haven had not attacked Amon at the last moment, he could have escaped. Maybe he thought that Amon was no match for him, or maybe he had no choice but to complete the mission. But in the end, Haven died. Amon did not want to let the stray dogs eat his body. He waved his staff and a fireball fell. The flames spread and engulfed Haven's body, burning him to ashes. Amon thought for a moment, and decided to cremate all the corpses. He had already killed all of them. There was no need to leave their corpses exposed in the wilderness. Besides, Amon did not want to leave any traces of the battle behind. Before burning the corpses, Amon did not forget to search for their belongings. His belongings were scattered among the corpses. Needless to say, there were some parangons, coins, weapons, and staffs. The most valuable staff was, of course, Obama's. Vitru's wasn't half bad either. Aman found 2 scrolls on Vitru's body. He also found a scroll in the ashes of Haven's body. But the most important things were 2, both from Vitru's bosom. The first object was a parangan inlaid with a magic formation at the base. It looked like a delicate lamp. Aman recognized it. Crazy Ol had taught him how to make all kinds of magic artifacts, and one of them mentioned the shadow-chasing lamp. It would have been very difficult for Aman to collect the materials himself, and he would have failed many times before he could make it. But today he had found a precious product. He knew how to use this artifact. Only now did he understand why he had never been able to shake off his pursuers. The second item was a letter sealed in a leather case. It had been sealed with magic. If the person who received the letter could not open the magic circle on the envelope, the letter inside would be destroyed when the envelope was opened. Naturally, nothing would be seen. But this did not trouble Aman. He opened the letter in one piece. The content of the letter was written in the hieroglyph of Igut. Ordinary people would not be able to understand it, but Aman could read it. The letter was written by Julian to Burke, another high priest of the Temple of Isis. Aman gasped when he read it. The letter mentioned people he was familiar with, the adoratress Maria and the supreme warrior Gabriel. There were also secrets he had never heard of before. Julian conspired with Bork to get the adoratress to issue a new order to transfer him back to Memphis from the City of Straits under the pretext of an emergency. The letter also mentioned Gabriel. The adoratress was young and ignorant, and Gabriel helped her a lot. They should find a way to transfer Gabriel away from the temple, so that she would never have a chance to come back. Julian recommended Haven, the captain of her guards. She said that this warrior was likely to be promoted to a supreme warrior, and could take over Gabriel's position. Aman only knew that Iko had become the adoratress of the Temple of Isis. But now he knew that the high priest of the Temple of Isis had other selfish motives. It seemed that he was not willing to give up his full strength. He just wanted the adoratress to be a symbolic puppet. He even had the intention to murder Gabriel. It seemed that Gabriel was now the most valued assistant of the adoratress. The assistant of the adoratress should have been the high priest. Presumably, Iko's life would not be very comfortable. Aman watched for a long time. He had just gotten rid of the threat of death, but he was worried about Icho again. Anyway, his destination was Montefiore. He must find a way to give this letter to Iko so that she could be prepared and take precautions. In Aman's mind, although Iko Maria had become the adoratress of the Temple of Isis for him, she would always be a weak and pure girl. Aman did not know why he wanted to go to Montefiore. Was it to see the famous capital of Igut on his way to the mainland? Only now did he suddenly understand. It was because of Iko. When he walked out of the mountains and faced a strange and unknown world, his first stop was to go to the kingdom of Babylon to find Madanzo. The branch broke, and he fell to the ground. Aman tried his best to get up, but in the end he could only turn over and lie on his back on the river. Even his eyelids became as heavy as 2 mountains. When he finally opened his eyes, they were greeted by the sunlight. The light in front of him was dazzling. It was as if there were countless transparent mosquitoes flying around. The soil under him seemed to emit a strange smell, and he was in a trance. You're tuning into the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.